Chapter 579. Boom! Huge waves surged on the surface of the heavenly lake, and a pillar of water soared into the sky. Within the water column, a red shadow broke out of the water in an instant. Yi Fan looked completely different now, from his appearance to his clothes. He was wearing a purple gold crown on his head, a bright red robe embroidered with dragons, a jade belt with 8 treasures around his waist, and a pair of immortal shoes on his feet. He had sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, black hair, and jade-like skin. He was handsome and dignified. No matter who the person was, he couldn't show his real face. He had to make sure that no one knew that he came to the heavenly lake to search for the cauldron. After coming out of the water, Yi Fan stopped in the air. He waved the sleeves of his red robe and stood in the air with his hands behind his back. He looked at the opposite side calmly. On the top of a mountain, not far from the shore of the heavenly lake, an old man was looking at Yi Fan with a smile on his face. The old man looked to be in his 60s. He had silver hair and a pair of small eyes, which were full of energy, flashed with a strange light. What shocked Yi Fan even more was that the old man was wearing a golden dragon robe and a jade belt with a coiled dragon around his waist. Could he be a member of the imperial family? Yi Fan frowned. The two of them looked at each other from a distance and observed each other. Neither of them said a word. The night wind blew, causing the robes on their bodies to flutter in the wind, making a flapping sound. After a long time, the old man broke the silence and said to Yi Fan, "This little brother is really capable. You have such a powerful cultivation at such a young age. I really admire you." "Senior, you flatter me," Yi Fan, who was floating in the air, replied to the old man in a deep voice. "Senior, your cultivation is not bad either." Yi Fan had sensed the old man's cultivation just now. Like him, the old man's primordial spirit had also come out of his body. The aura emitted from his body was overbearing and evil. It was familiar yet strange. Ha ha ha! After the old man heard Yi Fan's words, he threw his head back and laughed. "I really didn't expect that this old man would actually be praised by a young man today, ha ha ha. May I know why Senior has come here in the middle of the night?" Yi Fan didn't have the leisure to chat with this person, and directly cut to the chase. If this person was an expert passing by, he would directly leave. If this person was one of Xie Tian's 9 demon guards, he would see if he could see through his identity. If Matsumoto Takeyoshi didn't recognize him, everything would be fine. If he recognized him, he would go all the way and kill him. He couldn't let Matsumoto Takeyoshi know that his primordial spirit had left his body and came here to search for the cauldron. Ha ha ha! The old man stroked his white beard and laughed heartily. "Just like you, this old man came here in the middle of the night for the divine cauldron in the water." As the old man spoke, he looked at Yi Fan with a pair of bright eyes. His gaze was as sharp as a knife, extremely sharp. When Yi Fan heard this, he was shocked and his expression changed. This person actually knew that there was a divine cauldron hidden under this heavenly lake. Another cauldron seeker, Yi Fan thought in his heart. If this old man isn't wrong, little brother has already broken the enchantment of the underwater divine cauldron and obtained the secret patterns on the divine cauldron. The old man in the dragon robe said with a smile. When he said this, Yi Fan's pupils instantly constricted. What kind of background did this old man have? He even knew about the patterns of the divine cauldron. "Senior, what do you mean by that?" Yi Fan narrowed his eyes and asked the old man, his voice turning cold. He wanted to hear what the old man had to say. If this person really knew about his secrets, then he had to get rid of him to prevent future troubles. Just now, the heavenly lake shook and the golden and red light soared into the sky. From this, it can be inferred that this divine cauldron enchantment was broken by little brother. The dragon-robed old man said with a smile. "What about the divine cauldron's patterns?" Yi Fan asked coldly. "How did Senior know?" "Ha ha ha! That's even simpler." The old man laughed loudly. Those who want to seize the divine cauldron only have three goals. First, to seize the world and become a great treasure. Second, to gather the patterns on the 9 cauldrons and cultivate the ancient secret technique. Third, to obtain the supreme inscriptions within the cauldron, cultivate the supreme divine power, and achieve an immortal body. Little brother, you did not take the divine cauldron away, which proves that little brother does not have the heart to become an emperor. The bell-keeper of this cauldron did not appear, which proves that little brother did not take the inscriptions within the cauldron. From these 2 points, we can deduce that little brother must have broken the seal of the divine cauldron for the patterns on the cauldron. The old man's words left Yifan speechless. This person was extremely intelligent, his thoughts were meticulous, his reasoning was bold and meticulous, and from the details, one could see his true skills. What about Senior? Yifan asked the old man. Senior, why are you looking for the cauldron? The world or power? Or perhaps both? What? Is my dragon robe not enough to answer your question? The old man raised his arms and smiled as he looked down at his golden dragon robe. Senior, are you looking for the cauldron to seize the great Ming dynasty? Yifan frowned and asked the old man in the dragon robe. With the dragon robe on, there was no need to ask further. I'm not seizing, I'm retrieving. The old man raised his head and smiled. Retrieving? Yifan asked doubtfully. That's right. This country was originally conquered by my clan's great ancestor, so you can only say that it's retrieving, not seizing, the old man said with a dignified expression. Senior, you mean? Yifan seemed to understand the old man's meaning. As long as you know my surname, you will understand what I mean, the old man said calmly. May I know Senior's name? Yifan asked. Zhao. The old man spat out a word. Zhao. Yifan was shocked when he heard this. Senior, could it be that you are? That's right. I am a direct descendant of the Great Song dynasty, the old man said with dignity. Great Song dynasty? Yifan immediately understood the old man's words. This person was wearing a dragon robe and was looking for the 9 cauldrons to restore the Great Song dynasty. Now you understand why I'm looking for the 9 cauldrons, right? The old man recovered his previous tone and asked Yifan. Yifan nodded slowly. You take the pattern of the divine cauldron, and I take the body of the 9 cauldrons. It seems like we can work together in the future, the old man said to Yifan with a smile. Work together? How? Yifan raised his eyebrows and asked. After you find the divine cauldron and get the pattern, you can tell me the location of the divine cauldron. After I find the divine cauldron, I can tell you the location and let you get the pattern. How about it? The old man looked at Yifan with bright eyes and said, If I become emperor in the future, I will definitely not treat you unfairly and let you enjoy all the glory and wealth. Yifan smiled when he heard this. Have you thought about it? The old man asked Yifan. Senior, you're really counting your chickens before they hatch, Yifan said with a smile. These 2 conditions may seem fair at first, but in reality they're not. Regardless of whether you find the divine cauldron first or I find it first, we must first break the enchantment in order to take the pattern. Senior, you're using me to break the enchantment to take the divine cauldron and reap the benefit. The old man was smart, but he was not stupid. He. The old man laughed dryly and said, We each take what we need. Why not? Thank you for your kindness, Senior. Yifan smiled as he replied, I've always been a free and undisciplined person. I'm a lone wolf and I'm not used to working with others. I think that we shouldn't take what we need from each other. It's better if we each display our own abilities. The reason why the 9 divine cauldrons were so difficult to find was because they were protected by a powerful enchantment. This person wanted to use his power to help him find the 9 cauldrons and ascend to the throne. It was simply wishful thinking. As Yifan spoke, he stepped into the void and prepared to leave. Little brother. The moment Yifan turned around, the old man's voice sounded from behind him. Yi Fan stopped in his tracks and did not move. We can't do business, but we can still be friends. I hope that we won't become enemies in the future, the old man said calmly to Yi Fan. I'm only looking for the pattern of the divine cauldron. I don't care about anything else. It has nothing to do with me who becomes the emperor. However, Yi Fan said as he turned his head, if anyone deliberately makes an enemy out of me and blocks my path, I'll make them regret it. What do you mean by that? Are you threatening me? The old man asked calmly. That depends on what Senior thinks. The red-robed Yi Fan smiled and turned his head. With a wave of his sleeve, he turned into a bright blood-red star and instantly streaked across the sky and disappeared. After Yi Fan left, a mysterious smile appeared on the old man's face. He lowered his head and looked at the heavenly lake that was gradually calming down. Then, he circulated his essence soul's spiritual energy. Buzz. As a black beam of light shot out from the old man's body, a bright black swastika appeared between his eyebrows. Whoosh! The dragon-robed old man instantly transformed into a black beam and charged into the heavenly lake in the sky above the East Sea. A blood-red star with a long tail tore through Yikong and headed straight for the boat. Whoosh! As the blood-red star charged into the boat's cabin, Yi Fan's figure appeared out of thin air. However, what shocked him was that his physical body was not sitting cross-legged. Instead, it was hugging Baihu and looking at him with a smile. In the cabin, the black-robed Yi Fan drank tea as he asked the red-robed Yi Fan's essence soul, "How did you become like this?" Baihu, who was in the black-robed Yi Fan's arms, immediately understood when she saw Yi Fan speaking to the void in front of her. The black-robed Yi Fan had already explained everything to her just now. She raised her head and looked into the void, her eyes filled with concern. However, she could not see anything. "Why didn't you stay in your bamboo forest? What are you doing here?" The Hong Pao Yi Fan frowned and slowly descended from the void. "Matsumoto Takeyoshi and that white-robed man just left. What do you think I'm doing here?" The black-robed Yi Fan calmly put down his teacup and said, "Matsumoto Takeyoshi? White-robed man." The Hong Pao Yi Fan immediately became nervous upon hearing the black-robed Yi Fan's words. "They were here? How clever do you think your escape plan is?" The black-robed Yi Fan looked up at the red-clothed Yi Fan. "You might be able to fool that white-robed man, but you won't be able to fool Matsumoto Takeyoshi. If I hadn't appeared in time, your act would have been ruined." The red-clothed Yi Fan frowned. He had really underestimated Matsumoto Takeyoshi. He originally thought that as long as his physical body was here, Matsumoto Takeyoshi would not suspect anything. He never expected that Matsumoto Takeyoshi would become suspicious and come here personally. "I didn't give myself away, right?" the red-clothed Yi Fan asked with a frown. "Nothing happened this time. I don't know if it will happen again," the black-robed Yi Fan said. "Thank you," the red-clothed Yi Fan said to the black-robed Yi Fan. "Since you are back, it's time for me to return to the bamboo forest. Remember, that white-robed man is different from before. It's best you don't underestimate him," the black-robed Yi Fan said. The red-clothed Yi Fan wanted to ask what Matsumoto Takeyoshi had said, but he realized that his physical body's eyes were tightly shut and there was no movement. When Yi Fan saw this, he walked straight to his physical body. His essence soul returned to his body, and his body and soul became one. With a hum, a green light gently emitted from Yi Fan's body. Yi Fan opened his eyes. "Woo!" Baihu sensed the change in Yi Fan's aura. She gently raised her front paw and pressed on Yi Fan's shoulder. Her clear eyes stared intently at Yi Fan. Chapter 580. Maoshan Ancestral Court. Night. Buzz, in the training room, Lu Yuanshan, who was dressed in a golden Taoist robe, sat on the futon with his eyes closed. Above his head, a huge Tai Chi 8 trigrams floated in the air and spun slowly. The Tai Chi 8 trigrams was 9 feet in size. There were 2 yin-yang fishes, one gold and one black. The golden yang fish shone brightly, while the black een fish shone brightly. Wush Qian, Kun Zhen, Sun Kan Li Zhen, and Dui. 8 rays of golden light shone down from the 8 trigrams outside the Tai Chi diagram, enveloping Lu Yuanshan, who was sitting on the futon. Ever since he obtained the corpse core of the 1,000-year-old savage zombie king, his power had been increasing day by day. The pure and yang Taoist cultivation method and the pure and yang zombie king evil cultivation method were perfectly fused together by him using the Tai Chi 8 trigrams. Right now, Lu Yuanshan had both the powers of good and evil. Compared to when he first obtained the corpse core, it was simply incomparable. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Lu Yuanshan was concentrating on his cultivation, there was a soft knock on the stone door. What's the matter? Lu Yuanshan frowned and asked. Master, there's an important guest outside the door. The savage zombie king's voice came from outside the door. Didn't I say? Lu Yuanshan said coldly. When I'm cultivating, no one is to disturb me. I won't see him. Master, the visitor is from the imperial court. The savage zombie king, who had transformed into Dao Xian, said softly. The imperial court? Hearing Dao Xian's words, Lu Yuanshan, who was in the Taiji light shield, slowly opened his eyes and asked. Yes. Dao Xian replied. Who is it from the imperial court? Lu Yuanshan asked again. The visitor is holding an imperial edict and is followed by an old eunuch. I didn't dare to ask. Dao Xian replied. Okay, I understand. Lu Yuanshan closed his eyes. Tell them that I'll be right there. Also, treat the guest well. Do not neglect him. There was no one else other than Xuanji. Lu Yuanshan thought to himself. Ever since he failed to find the cauldron at the Sisui River, he had been staying in Mao Mountain to focus on cultivating and improving his cultivation. During this time, Imperial Tutor Xian Ji did not summon him to the palace. It had been nearly 3 months since the incident, and he had always thought that the imperial court had given up on the search for the cauldron. Now, it seemed that the matter was not over yet. Yes, master, Dao Xian replied and turned to leave. Lu Yuanshan slowly retracted the Tai Chi Yin-Yang 8 trigrams diagram above his head and returned it to his body. He stood up from the futon and tidied up his gold-threaded Taoist robe. He walked out of the secret practice room with his hands behind his back and went to the tea room in the side hall. At that moment, in the tea room of the side hall, a young man with the bearing of Bufan was looking at the map of Mao Mountain hanging on the wall with his hands behind his back. This person looked to be in his 20s. He wore a golden dragon crown on his head and a black dragon robe. His face was like jade and his eyes were like stars. He had a dignified temperament. He was Bufan. Beside him, an old eunuch stood respectfully beside the young man with a horsetail whisk in his hand and his head lowered. Lu Yuanshan, who had already arrived at the entrance of the side chamber, frowned when he saw the two of them. It was not Xuanji. No matter how bold Xuanji was, he would not dare to wear a dragon robe here. Judging from this person's attire, he was at least a prince. Where's Xuanji? Why wasn't he here? Who was this distinguished guest? What business did he have with him? Countless questions swirled in Lu Yuanshan's mind. May I know the purpose of your visit to Mao Mountain in the middle of the night? Lu Yuanshan said as he slowly walked into the hall with his hands behind his back. He did not care whether they were friend or foe. With his current cultivation, he could easily deal with all the Taoist sex experts, let alone 2 ordinary people. After hearing Lu Yuanshan's voice, the young man in the gold-threaded black dragon robe slowly turned around. You're Lu Yuanshan? The young man asked Lu Yuanshan slowly. Yes, I am. May I know who this distinguished guest is? Lu Yuanshan asked the young man with a smile. How dare you? The old eunuch saw Lu Yuanshan's slightly arrogant attitude and immediately scolded in a low voice. Kneel and greet the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince. It was the Crown Prince. Lu Yuanshan was stunned when he heard the old eunuch's words, then his expression changed drastically. I didn't know the Crown Prince was coming to Mao Mountain. Please forgive me for not coming out to greet you, Lu Yuanshan said as he stepped forward and knelt on the ground. He respectfully kowtowed to the young man. He knew of the Crown Prince's reputation. Although this person was young, he was extremely intelligent and resourceful. It was said that when the Crown Prince was born, there was a vision of a golden dragon. The sect leader of Mao Mountain, Lu Ji, was secretly invited into the palace by the current emperor to calculate the birth of his son. After Lu Ji saw the Crown Prince, he only said 8 words. The chi of the dragon was vast and mighty. The true dragon was the son of heaven. No matter how arrogant Lu Yuanshan was, he would not dare to go against the will of heaven. No wonder when he was practicing just now, he vaguely felt a majestic chi of the dragon enveloping Mao Mountain. It was the Crown Prince. Rise. The Crown Prince in the gold-threaded black dragon robe looked at Lu Yuanshan kneeling in front of him and said with a smile, "Thank you, Your Highness." Lu Yuanshan slowly stood up and stood in front of the Crown Prince with his hands by his side. "When your disciple went to report to you, you must have thought it was Xuanji, right?" As the Crown Princess spoke slowly, she shook the black dragon robe on her body and slowly sat down on the master's armchair. This sentence made Lu Yuanshan, who had lowered his head, shocked. He suddenly had a feeling that something had happened to Xuanji. "Your Highness, Your Highness," Lu Yuanshan lowered his head and replied respectfully. "To be honest, Your Highness, I did think it was the state preceptor. I heard that you and the state preceptor call each other brothers. Is that true?" The Crown Prince asked Lu Yuanshan with a smile. "The state preceptor is of high status and I am of low status. How could I dare call him my brother?" Lu Yuanshan replied wittily. "That was then and this is now. Now, he must draw a clear line between him and Xuanji. I heard that last time, your Taoist sect gathered all the sect masters and Sisui to use the 10,000 ghost formation to search for the divine cauldron in the river. Is that true?" The Crown Prince asked Lu Yuanshan with a smile. "Your Highness, it is true," Lu Yuanshan replied. "Did you find the divine cauldron?" The Crown Prince continued to ask. "No," Lu Yuanshan replied. Lu Yuanshan replied, "When the 10,000 ghost great array was activated halfway, people from the myriad immortal tower suddenly appeared and stopped the activation of the array." "Someone from the 10,000 immortal tower? That Bai Sheng?" The Crown Prince raised his eyebrows. "One of his protectors," Lu Yuanshan replied. "I heard that sect master Lu fought with that protector?" The Crown Prince asked with a smile. "Did you win or lose?" "I wanted to stop it, but I was worried that the ghosts would go on a rampage and disturb the people. So I could only let him go," Lu Yuanshan said against his will. The famous Maoshan sect master actually lost to a ghost. If this news spread, wouldn't the Taoists laugh their heads off? "Let me ask you. That bastard Xuanji put the current emperor under house arrest, deceived his superiors and subordinates, passed down a fake imperial edict, betrayed his master for glory, and secretly contacted the traitor of Japan, Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Do you know anything about this matter?" The Crown Prince asked Lu Yuanshan with a smile as he lifted the fragrant tea on the table to his mouth and gently blew at it. Lu Yuanshan's pupils constricted. Something really happened to Xuanji. Otherwise, how would the Crown Prince know so much? This Xuanji even confessed to Matsumoto Takeyoshi to the Crown Prince. Didn't that mean that he also told the Crown Prince about his collusion with him? Cold sweat began to form on Lu Yuanshan's forehead. Aiding a villain, not reporting what he knew, colluding with him to commit treason. Once these crimes were confirmed, he would be punished with death. Lu Yuanshan was indeed worthy of being the head of a sect. At this critical moment, he held a divination hand in his sleeve and performed a divination. This divination was performed by none other than Xuanji. Chirp, 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 as his fingers moved back and forth, a few tiny golden dots flickered on his fingertips. "The Crown Prince is asking you a question, hurry up and answer," the old eunuch shouted at Lu Yuanshan. Replying to the Crown Prince, "This lowly Taoist does not know anything about this matter." Lu Yuanshan pretended to be innocent and said with a shocked face, "How could this lowly Taoist do such a disgraceful and heinous thing? Then why are you sweating?" And the Crown Prince looked at the fine beads of sweat on Lu Yuanshan's forehead and asked with a smile, "This lowly Taoist does not dare to believe that the state teacher would do such a heinous thing. Is the Crown Prince mistaken?" Lu Yuanshan frowned and continued to pretend that he did not know anything. "How dare you?" the old eunuch shouted again. "That Xuanji personally admitted that you are in cahoots with him and are loyal to the traitor of Dongying, Matsumoto Takeyoshi. You still dare to deny it?" The Crown Prince lowered his head and drank his tea, waiting for Lu Yuanshan's explanation. "If your Highness does not believe me, you can bring this lowly Taoist to see Xuanji. This lowly Taoist will confront him face to face," Lu Yuanshan said righteously. He dared to say this because he had already divined that Xuanji Sutra was no longer in this world. As the saying goes, dead men tell no tales. With Xuanji dead, there was no evidence left. That Xuanji consumed Matsumoto Takeyoshi's special poison and has died. The Crown Prince put aside the teacup in his hand and said to Lu Yuanshan, "The state teacher is dead?" Lu Yuanshan continued to act and asked in shock, "I don't care if what you said is true or not, and I don't care what you did before." The Crown Prince said to Lu Yuanshan, "From now on, I want you to be loyal to me. Are you willing?" When the Crown Prince said this, Lu Yuanshan was overjoyed. The Crown Prince came here in the middle of the night to recruit him. This lowly Taoist is worthy of the Crown Prince's favor, Lu Yuanshan said as he prostrated himself on the ground again. He lowered his body and stuck out his butt, bowing to the Crown Prince. Despite his superb acting skills, he still shed tears. The old eunuch looked at the kneeling Lu Yuanshan with disdain. He had clearly heard the secret conversation between Lu Yuanshan and Xuanji in the Imperial Palace's teahouse. Now that Xuanji was dead, not only did this fellow avoid a calamity, he even profited from a disaster and received the Crown Prince's decree. "Stand up." The Crown Prince waved his sleeves and said, "Thank you, Your Highness," Lu Yuanshan said as he pretended to wipe his tears and stood up. "Fuline, announce the decree," the Crown Prince said to the old eunuch. "Yes, Your Highness," the old eunuch said as he took out a yellow scroll from his sleeve and held it with both hands. Lu Yuanshan receives the decree. This lowly Taoist receives the decree. Lu Yuanshan flung his Taoist robe and knelt again. By the will of the heavens, the Emperor decrees that the Maoshan sect leader, Lu Yuanshan, is extremely benevolent and righteous. He is hereby conferred the title of State Teacher of the Great Ming. The old eunuch loudly read the decree. Lu Yuanshan was overjoyed. He had become the State Teacher of the Great Ming. He did not expect that Xuanji's death would be a blessing in disguise. This lowly Taoist thanks the Emperor for his grace. Lu Yuanshan received the decree with both hands. Chapter 581. Your Highness, please give me your orders. This humble subject will go through fire and water without hesitation. Lu Yuanshan stood up and said to the Crown Prince, "Do you know Zhou Dao?" The Crown Prince asked Lu Yuanshan, "Your Highness, are you talking about Great General Zhou, who commands a large number of troops and went to the border?" Lu Yuanshan pretended to be ignorant and asked the Crown Prince. "His true identity isn't Zhou Dao. He's Matsumoto Takeyoshi's only son, Matsumoto Taro," the Crown Prince in a black robe said to Lu Yuanshan calmly. "General Zhou is Matsumoto Takeyoshi's only son?" Lu Yuanshan pretended to be shocked and sucked in a breath of cold air. "That's right," the Crown Prince continued. "Matsumoto Takeyoshi placed his only son in the imperial court. He commands a large number of troops and holds a high position in order to one day seize the great Ming dynasty. As long as this person is not eliminated, there will be no peace in the imperial court. Lu Yuanshan slowly nodded. This time, the four countries are pressuring the border. On the surface, it looks like they are attacking the great Ming dynasty, but in reality, they are allying with the experts of the four countries to kill Zhou Dao. The Crown Prince's expression became serious. Originally, this plan was foolproof, but unexpectedly, Matsumoto Takeyoshi had a backup plan. He secretly sent ninja troops to support Zhou Dao and sent top experts to rescue him. Now, Zhou Dao has a large number of troops and experts in his hands. He is attacking the troops of the four countries with all his strength. The war situation is starting to spiral out of control. There's such a thing? Lu Yuanshan was shocked. He really did not know about this matter. The Crown Prince nodded. Your Highness, why don't you report to the Emperor and order Zhou Dao to return to the imperial court? Lu Yuanshan cupped his hands and said, This way we can capture Zhou Dao and punish him. The Crown Prince smiled and did not speak. Right now, more than half of the military power in the imperial court is in the hands of Zhou Dao. As the saying goes, when a general is outside, the emperor's orders cannot be obeyed. At this moment, Zhou Dao still claims to be a subject and is attacking the four states. If the emperor orders him to return to the imperial court, won't he become suspicious? The old eunuch on the side said to Lu Yuanshan, If we force him into a corner and force him into a rebellion, how will the imperial court deal with him? This. Lu Yuanshan's brows furrowed. That's not what I'm most worried about, the Crown Prince continued and worriedly said. What I'm most worried about is that the four countries will become anxious after being attacked by Zhou Dao's ninja troops. Once the four countries really launch an attack on the Great Ming, they will spread out and fight on the border. We won't have the ability to fight back. Aren't the four countries already retreating in defeat? Lu Yuanshan asked. This is just the beginning, the Crown Prince said. The troops of the four countries only gathered a large number of troops this time and pretended to attack the Great Ming Empire. They didn't advance with the army. In addition, the ninja troops that Matsumoto Takeyoshi sent to Zhou Dao are very powerful. Naturally, they will be defeated. When they recover their strength, gather their heavy troops, and make a comeback, the situation will not necessarily be like this. Zhou Dao is unwilling to return to the imperial court. He will definitely defend the border. With a large number of troops and the support of the ninja troops, he should be able to resist the four countries, Lu Yuanshan said. You're thinking too simply. The old eunuch looked at Lu Yuanshan and said slowly, Once the four countries make a comeback and attack the Great Ming Empire, do you think that Matsumoto Takeyoshi will still let Zhou Dao defend the border and resist with all his strength? Lu Yuanshan's expression changed greatly after hearing this. With Matsumoto Takeyoshi's influence in the imperial court, the news of father being saved, Zhou Dao being killed, and Xuanji leaking the secret must have reached his ears by now, the Crown Prince said with a frown. The reason why he attacked the four countries with all his strength was to let the wolf into the house. He will sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the clam will fight, and the fisherman will benefit. At that time, it's hard to say whether the Great Ming Empire will still belong to the Zhou family. After hearing the Crown Prince's words, Lu Yuanshan felt a chill in his heart. He was shocked by the Crown Prince's shocking plan to lure the tiger away from the mountain. He was also shocked by Matsumoto Takeyoshi's method of countering each move as they came. Of these two people, one was wise and resourceful, a newborn calf that was not afraid of the tiger. The other was astute and cunning, turning something rotten into something miraculous. It could be said that he met his match, a general meeting a talent. At this moment, he was at a crossroad. On one side was Matsumoto Takeyoshi, and on the other side was the Crown Prince. He had to make a choice. Either he helped Matsumoto Takeyoshi, or he helped the crown prince. It was said that these two people were appointed by the Son of Heaven to be the left assistant and the right assistant, and their origins were Buffon. But soon, he made a choice. That was to choose the strong. There was a saying, a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in, a virtuous minister chooses a master to serve. He would follow the one whose fist was harder. Looking at the current situation, it was still impossible to see who would win and who would lose. What he needed to do now was to not offend either side, and take one step at a time. Since he had to help the crown prince, he could not cut off contact with Matsumoto Takeyoshi. This way, he could leave himself a way out. Your Highness, how can I help? Thinking of this, Lu Yuanshan asked the crown prince. I heard that the ninja army that Matsumoto Takeyoshi sent to the great Ming dynasty is very strong. With just a few thousand people, they were able to heavily injure the Mongol heavy cavalry. Their ninjutsu is ever-changing, and they are ruthless and ruthless. They have a strength that even 1,000 soldiers would not be able to resist. This time, I came to Mao Mountain in the middle of the night to confer you the position of imperial teacher, and to make you think of a plan to deal with the enemy as soon as possible. Otherwise, when the situation changes and war breaks out, won't the great Ming dynasty's soldiers become fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered? After hearing this, Lu Yuanshan frowned. He did not expect that the first task the crown prince gave him would be to fight against Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army. He knew very well how strong Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army was. In the past, when he was chatting with Profound Secrets, he had mentioned this matter to him. According to Profound Secrets, Matsumoto Takeyoshi was most proud of three kinds of forces: the ninja army that numbered in the tens of thousands, the Japanese experts that were as common as clouds, and the evil god Sietian that was supporting him from behind. Of these three forces, the ninja army was the most loyal to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. It was said that most of these ninjas were orphans left behind from the war. They were taken in by the Matsumoto family since they were young and carefully trained to become ninjas. Not only were these people's ninjutsu and sword skills excellent, they were also absolutely loyal to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. They were willing to pay any price, even their lives. As the saying goes, the soft fear the hard, and the hard fear those who do not care about their lives. With their valiant battle prowess and their unflinching loyalty, these people were simply perfect killing machines. In the Jianghu, dealing with a few of these ninjas was a piece of cake for him. However, on the battlefield, facing thousands of ninjas, he was powerless. Lu Yuanshan looked worried as he thought hard. Don't you know the 1,000 Ghost Formation? The old eunuch asked Lu Yuanshan. Can you summon the ghosts to fight? You may not know this, but while the 1,000 Ghost Formation is very powerful, it cannot be used on the battlefield. Lu Yuanshan shook his head and said, It cannot be used? Why is that? The old eunuch frowned and asked. On the battlefield, there are thousands of soldiers on both sides, and all of them are masculine men. When both sides fight, their killing intent and will to fight are very strong. The ghosts would be running away, so why would they show up? Lu Yuanshan explained. The old eunuch nodded slowly. If the ghosts cannot be used, then what about zombies? The crown prince looked at Lu Yuanshan and asked. Zombies? Lu Yuanshan looked puzzled. The Maoshan sect has always been an expert in exorcising ghosts and destroying zombies. Among the Taoist sects, no one would dare to claim to be the best. The crown prince picked up the fragrant tea on the table and said to Lu Yuanshan, I heard that the Maoshan sect has ways to control zombies, and can even use corpses to control zombies. Is that true? The crown prince took a sip of tea as he spoke. Your Highness, such a thing is true. Lu Yuanshan lowered his head and answered. He dared not hide such a thing, nor was he able to. Controlling zombies and using corpses to control zombies had become a secret art of the Maoshan sect. If that is the case, why not build an army of zombies? The Crown Prince raised his eyebrows and looked at Lu Yuanshan as he sipped his tea. Zombie? Army of zombies? Lu Yuanshan looked up and blurted out in shock. The idea of the Crown Prince shocked him so much that he could hardly believe his ears. Build an army of zombies specifically to fight Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja forces, the Crown Prince said. Would that work? Your Highness, Lu Yuanshan answered, theoretically it would work, but what? The Crown Prince asked. In times of peace, zombies are few and far between. While zombies are immensely powerful, they are afraid of things like sunlight, glutinous rice, and yellow talismans. If there are Taoist fighters among the enemy forces, the formation would be easily broken. Lu Yuanshan lowered his head and said, Smack. The Crown Prince's expression turned cold as he slammed his teacup on the table, causing tea to splash everywhere. Lu Yuanshan hurriedly lowered his head. You are the state preceptor, you think of a way. The Crown Prince's voice was imposing. If you can't think of a way, then you don't have to be the state preceptor anymore. As the saying goes, accompanying the emperor is like accompanying a tiger. The Crown Prince, who was smiling a moment ago, suddenly turned cold and ruthless. Fuline, return to the palace. The Crown Prince said expressionlessly as he slowly stood up from his chair. Yes. The old eunuch replied. Your Highness, please stay. Lu Yuanshan saw that the Crown Prince was about to leave and immediately bowed respectfully. The Crown Prince coldly glanced at Lu Yuanshan and sat back down on his chair. What is it? The Crown Prince asked coldly. I have thought of a way, but I don't know what your Highness thinks. Lu Yuanshan lowered his head and said. What way? The Crown Prince asked. Zombie demon. Lu Yuanshan spat out 2 words. Zombie demon? The Crown Prince heard these 2 words and was puzzled. This was the first time he heard this word. What is a zombie demon? The Crown Prince asked Lu Yuanshan. Half human, half zombie. Lu Yuanshan replied. Half human, half zombie? The Crown Prince frowned. What kind of half human, half zombie technique? Take a man in the prime of his life and use a zombie to bite him, causing his body to be poisoned. Lu Yuanshan replied. Poisoned? Then wouldn't he become a zombie? The Crown Prince asked. If the poison attacks the heart, then he will indeed become a zombie. But before the poison affects the mind of a living person, the poison in their body can be sealed. A living person will become a half-human, half-zombie. In other words, a zombie demon. Lu Yuanshan replied. Half-human, half-zombie, zombie demon. The Crown Prince muttered to himself. Then is it a living person or a dead person? Chapter 582. Living Dead. The Crown Prince frowned. Exactly. Lu Yuanshan replied. How does this living dead compare to the zombies? The Crown Prince asked Lu Yuanshan. This living dead is half-human half-zombie, half-human half-zombie, half-human half-zombie, half-human half-zombie, half-human half-zombie, Lu Yuanshan respectfully said to the Crown Prince. Not only that, this thing is not afraid of sunlight, not afraid of yellow talismans, not feeling pain, not feeling fatigue, it feeds on flesh and blood, its strength is incomparable. This thing is so powerful? The Crown Prince's eyes lit up. Lu Yuanshan nodded. The Crown Prince looked at Lu Yuanshan and asked, You just said that this thing's consciousness is still intact, in other words, it can obey orders? Yes, Lu Yuanshan said to the Crown Prince, as long as the corpse poison is prevented from entering the brain, its consciousness is no different from that of a normal person, except that it is bloodthirsty. The Crown Prince thought for a moment and asked Lu Yuanshan, once it becomes a living dead, is it possible to return to being a human? It is possible to return to being a human, but it is very difficult. Lu Yuanshan replied, after this thing starts killing, it will become addicted to blood and gradually lose its humanity. Except for a few people who can forcibly control their killing intent, most of them will lose their consciousness due to the corpse poison and become bloodthirsty zombies. The Crown Prince closed his eyes and pondered. If this thing is really used to deal with the ninja army, it will require at least 10,000 people. The old eunuch on the side listened with a dignified expression. If this method is really used, these 10,000 people will most likely become bloodthirsty zombies after they turn into zombies. There is no possibility of them returning to being human again. This is a living human life. Lu Yuanshan breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, he thought of a method. As for whether this method is used or not, it is not his concern. After a long time, the Crown Prince slapped the armrest of the chair and said with a firm tone, "We will use this method." As soon as this was said, the old eunuch and Lu Yuanshan were shocked. They did not expect the Crown Prince to actually decide to use this method to deal with Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army. "Your Highness, if we use this method, we will need at least 10,000 people. Where are we going to find so many people who are willing to die?" The old eunuch bowed and asked the Crown Prince. "That's easy. Isn't it just 10,000 able-bodied men?" The Crown Prince smiled, picked up the fragrant tea on the table, and said with a smile, "If we gather all the prisoners on death row in the great Ming dynasty who are going to be executed after autumn, there will be more than 10,000 of them." The old eunuch was stunned at first, but then his eyes lit up and he nodded slightly. Using prisoners on death row who were about to be executed as an army of the living dead was indeed the most suitable method. On the other hand, Lu Yuanshan frowned and complained incessantly in his heart. He originally thought that the Crown Prince would put the plan aside because it would harm innocent lives. He never thought that the Crown Prince would come up with such a way to kill two birds with one stone. In this way, he would be busy because transforming over 10,000 death row prisoners into corpse demons would require at least a month of time. What made him even more worried was that once Matsumoto Takeyoshi learned that he had become the imperial preceptor of the Great Ming Dynasty and discovered that the Great Ming Dynasty had used the zombie demon technique to kill his ninja troops, wouldn't he become Matsumoto Takeyoshi's must-kill target? This matter had already become a hot potato for him. "Then it's decided," the Crown Prince said as he stood up from his chair and said to Lu Yuanshan, "Make the arrangements and take office in the court as soon as possible. Then start handling this matter in secret. I want you to prepare 10,000 corpse demons within a month, no mistakes." This humble subject obeys the decree. Lu Yuanshan lowered his head and said, The Crown Prince nodded and said, "This is the first thing I'm giving you. You must not let me down." "Rest assured, Your Highness. This humble subject will do his best," Lu Yuanshan said. "It's getting late. I have to return to the capital," the Crown Prince said. "It's already late at night. Why don't Your Highness spend the night on Mao Mountain and leave tomorrow?" Lu Yuanshan raised his head and asked the Crown Prince, "I can stay here, but what about the 3,000 Imperial Guards stationed at the foot of the mountain?" "Chem?" the Crown Prince said as he walked down the steps with his hands behind his back. When Lu Yuanshan heard this, he was secretly shocked. He originally thought that the Crown Prince and the old eunuch came secretly, but he didn't expect that they would bring 3,000 Imperial Guards with them. This Crown Prince really did not leave any loopholes. Lu Yuanshan did not even need to guess to know why the Crown Prince brought the soldiers here. If the Crown Prince did not appear when the time came, the 3,000 Imperial Guards stationed at the foot of the mountain would directly attack Mao Mountain. If he guessed correctly, the old eunuch beside the Crown Prince was definitely not an ordinary person. This humble subject will order people to prepare tents, wine, tea, and food for the soldiers. Lu Yuanshan bowed and said, "No need," the Crown Prince waved his hand. "I came here so late at night to not disturb the people. It's better to travel at night. I won't spend the night here. Since it's like this humble subject will send Your Highness down the mountain," Lu Yuanshan said. "No need. You should properly prepare for the corpse demon army," the Crown Prince said as he walked out of the side hall. The old eunuch followed closely behind. This humble subject respectfully sends your highness off, Lu Yuanshan said as he knelt on the ground. Your highness, that Lu Yuanshan colluded with Xuanji and colluded with the traitor of Dongying, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, this old servant saw and heard with my own ears. Why did your highness not punish him, but instead promote him to the state teacher of this dynasty? On the path down the mountain, the old eunuch holding a lantern and following behind the crown prince asked in confusion. Killing him now is of no use to us. Instead, we might as well throw him a bone and make him work for us, the crown prince said with a smile. When the cunning rabbit is dead, the hound is cooked. Once we deal with Matsumoto Takeyoshi, his time in this world will come to an end. Your highness, aren't you worried that he will tell Matsumoto Takeyoshi about the secret conversation just now? The old eunuch asked with a frown. Xuanji was captured, and Lu Yuanshan was promoted to state teacher. If this news reaches Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ears, what do you think he will think? The crown prince asked the old eunuch called Fulin with a smile. Matsumoto Takeyoshi will definitely think that he was the one who told you, your highness, the old eunuch said with a sudden realization. Truth and falsehood, truth and falsehood. Even if he tells Matsumoto Takeyoshi the truth now, Matsumoto Takeyoshi won't believe him so easily, the crown prince said with a smile. Moreover, he's in a high position now and has great power in his hands. Of course, he'll have to be careful. With his personality, he'll definitely avoid offending either side and leave himself a way out in the future. Then will he take the initiative to find Matsumoto Takeyoshi? The old eunuch asked. He won't, the crown prince said. If he takes the initiative to find Matsumoto Takeyoshi now, Matsumoto Takeyoshi is very likely to take his life. With his current situation, he can only pass a message to Matsumoto Takeyoshi through the informants that Matsumoto Takeyoshi placed in the palace. This old servant has already ordered people to secretly investigate the origins of all the palace maids and eunuchs in the palace. I believe that there will be results soon, the old eunuch said. Has everything been arranged in the state teacher's residence? The crown prince asked. It has been arranged, the old eunuch replied. All the palace maids and servants are our people. Your highness can rest assured about this. However, this old servant has one thing that I don't understand. Your highness, please tell me. Speak, the crown prince said with a smile. Lu Yuanshan's Taoism is exquisite and his cultivation is profound. No matter how many informants we arrange, I'm afraid it will be of no use to him. In this old servant's opinion, we will instead arouse his vigilance and alert the enemy, the old eunuch said to the crown prince. What I want is to alert the enemy. The crown prince smiled and patted the old eunuch's shoulder. This way we can always remind him not to do stupid things. Otherwise, he will die faster. The old eunuch nodded. By the way, Fulin, I want to ask you something. The crown prince looked at the old eunuch with a smile and asked, How high is this Lu Yuanshan's cultivation? Are you his opponent? Your highness, this question is difficult for this old servant, the old eunuch said with a smile. This old servant and Lu Yuanshan are from different sects and different cultivation methods. This old servant can't say who is better and who is worse. However, according to this old servant's observation, this Lu Yuanshan's body has a trace of evil aura that is extremely overbearing. And the Taoist who served your highness tea before, called Dao Xian, is even more problematic. That Taoist who served tea has a problem? What problem? The crown prince asked with a frown. This old servant dares to guarantee that that Taoist is definitely not human. If he is not a demon, then he is a monster. And the evil aura on Lu Yuanshan's body is exactly the same as that Taoist. The old eunuch said solemnly. It seems that the waters in this Maoshan ancestral court are very deep. The crown prince narrowed his eyes and said, You heard our conversation just now? In a secret chamber of Maoshan Mountain, Lu Yuanshan, who was sitting on a praying mat, asked the savage zombie king respectfully standing in front of him. I heard, master, the savage zombie king replied. What do you think about this matter? Lu Yuanshan asked the savage zombie king. I don't know about the others, but I did see some clues about that old eunuch, the savage zombie king replied. Master, after you enter the palace, you must be careful of this person. That old eunuch? I need to be careful of him? Lu Yuanshan looked at the savage zombie king with a doubtful expression. He had observed that old eunuch just now. At best, he was a martial arts expert. His cultivation was heaven-defying now. What was there to be worried about when he was just a mere mortal? Don't be fooled by his old appearance. In fact, he is a special technique expert, the savage zombie king replied. Special technique expert? Lu Yuanshan frowned and asked, Why can't I see it? He is proficient in techniques, not spirit energy. His appearance is exactly the same as an ordinary person. There is no difference. Naturally, Master couldn't see it, the savage zombie king replied. What about you? How did you see it? Lu Yuanshan raised his eyebrows and asked the savage zombie king. He had half of the savage zombie king's corpse core in his body. There was no reason why Dao Xian could see it, but he couldn't. Disciple has eaten many people. My ability to sense people is naturally stronger than Master. This is related to experience and has nothing to do with cultivation. The savage zombie king said to Lu Yuanshan, This is the first time Disciple has seen this person's special technique. After Master enters the palace, you must be extra careful of this person. The reason why he reminded Lu Yuanshan to be careful of the old eunuch was not to protect Lu Yuanshan, but to protect the crown prince. He had lived for more than 1,000 years and had eaten more people than Lu Yuanshan. What kind of person had he not seen? That crown prince was clearly using Lu Yuanshan, and Lu Yuanshan was still in the dark. The reason why he revealed the old eunuch's special ability to Lu Yuanshan was so that Lu Yuanshan would not dare to make a move against the crown prince. This way, the crown prince would one day use his special ability to get rid of Lu Yuanshan. Once Lu Yuanshan died, the Maoshan golden talisman in his body would naturally disappear. At that time, he could think of a way to take control of the Maoshan sect and become a true zombie sovereign. Chapter 583. 3 days later. Mongolia beyond the Great Wall. Night. In the Mongolian tent, Yi Yun, Yi Kong, and Yi Chun sat around the campfire, drinking wine to warm themselves. Above the campfire there was a golden, fat, and tender roasted lamb. The fire was red and warm, the wood crackled, and the smell of roasted lamb wafted into their nostrils. Good wine, fragrant meat, and a roaring campfire. This was a rare and pleasant thing in the world, but the three people around the campfire had serious expressions, as if they had something on their minds. Yi Chen kept drinking strong Mongolian wine. From time to time, he would use the sleeve of his Mongolian robe to wipe his mouth. Yi Kong's eyes were fixed. As he looked at the blazing bonfire in front of him, he used the branch in his hand to fiddle with the fire. Yi Yun, on the other hand, frowned slightly and sat cross-legged. The dancing flames illuminated his weather-beaten face. The three of them were silent and did not say a word. Boss, what should we do? Ye Chun, who reeked of alcohol, opened his mouth and broke the silence. Are we just going to watch that bastard Zhou Dao lead those ruthless ninja troops to assassinate and launch sneak attacks everywhere? If this continues, the 4 countries will turn their act into reality sooner or later. Just now, I heard Barter quietly tell me that the Mongolian Great Khan has secretly met with the secret envoys of Luocha, Goryeo, and Tubo to discuss the matter of counterattacking the Great Ming. Once the 4 countries reach a consensus and form an alliance, they will divide their forces to attack the Great Ming at the same time. At that time, even if Zhou Dao has a ninja army to protect him, he won't be able to withstand the war that will erupt everywhere. Just now, a small group of ninja troops used earth-release ninjutsu to ambush the Mongolian tent and killed more than a dozen sharpshooters sleeping inside. When the Yi family rushed over, the ninja troops had already used Earth Release to retreat. They came and went like the wind. Their attacks were ruthless, and their attacks were insidious. They never tangled with their opponents and perfectly completed their assassination missions. This was the reason why the ninja troops were famous all over the world. Recently, Zhou Dao's ninja unit had been using the 5 elements ninjutsu to attack the Mongolian tents from time to time. They specifically targeted the Divine Crossbow Battalion and the Warhorse Battalion, killing all the Divine Archers and good horses in the tents. In less than 2 months, the Mongolian army lost almost a third of their sharpshooters, and they lost almost half of their warhorses. The casualty ratio was even higher than normal battles. Even though the Mongolian army was already prepared and sent people to patrol day and night, and they even laid out their heavy armor on the ground so that they could sleep on it and never let their swords leave their bodies, this sort of defense was completely useless against the ninjas who were skilled in sneak attacks. The combat strength of this nearly 10,000 ninjas was definitely not something an ordinary ninja could compare to. They were all carefully trained by Matsumoto Takeyoshi, and each of them was an expert in ninjutsu and swordsmanship. They first used the earth movement technique to arrive under the large tent. Then, they used incomparably sharp war blades to directly pierce through the thick armor that the Mongolian army had laid on the ground in advance, piercing through the slumbering godly archers along with their armor. As for killing the warhorses, it couldn't be any simpler. Setting fire, poisoning, and even directly killing them were much easier than killing them. The reason why the Mongolian army was so strong was because they had the mobility of the warhorses and the Divine Crossbow Battalion that could attack from a distance. Now that these two had suffered heavy losses, their combat strength naturally plummeted. The method to break the enemy's earth movement technique was very simple. As long as they reinforced the ground, they could effectively prevent such an incident from happening. However, this was not the inland, but the vast grassland. Where could they find so many stones and iron slag to reinforce the ground? Furthermore, the Mongolian army was a mobile force and had to move to another place every few days. Even if they had so many stones and iron slag, they couldn't carry such heavy resources with them. How could they talk about mobility if they did? Every time he saw the tragic scene of his Mongolian brothers dying in their sleep and their heads being separated from their bodies, Yi Chun couldn't help but feel like his heart was being stabbed by a knife, and his anger soared to the heavens. If Yi Yun hadn't ordered the Yi family not to take the initiative to attack, he would have led the Yi family's experts to take revenge. The only thing he could do now was to drown his sorrows in alcohol. "Brother Yi Chun, you're wrong." Yi Kong, who had a serious expression, turned his head to look at Yi Chun as he continued to add firewood to the fire. Once the Four-Nation Alliance attacks the Great Ming Dynasty, Zhou Dao will definitely avoid the battle and open the gate of the stronghold, allowing the Four-Nation army to directly enter and attack the capital. When Yi Chun heard Yi Kong's words, he was immediately shocked. "Kong is right," Yi Yun, who had been silent all this time, said with a frown. The reason why he pursued the Four-Nation army and took the initiative to attack was to make the 4 countries suffer and regroup their army. Then, he would make the act real and attack the Great Ming Dynasty. When the 4 countries really start to attack the Great Ming Dynasty, he would avoid the battle and let the Four-Nation army enter. This move of using the enemy's strength to fight the enemies and sow discord is really clever. It's not right to fight, but it's also not right to not fight. Then, is the emperor who was rescued stupid? Is he going to let Zhou Dao do whatever he wants? Yi Chun said angrily, "Why don't you hurry up and issue a decree to order Zhou Dao to return to the capital?" "Issue a decree to return to the court?" Yi Kong asked. "Believe it or not, as long as the imperial decree arrives, Zhou Dao will immediately rebel. With the Four-Nation army and Zhou Dao's rebel army, the Great Ming Dynasty will have no power to fight back. Even if that's the case, there should be a secret envoy for the peace talks, right?" Yi Chun, who reeked of alcohol, said, It's been almost 2 months, and there's not even a shadow of a person. Even if the imperial court sends a secret envoy, do you think he can get here smoothly? Yi Yun raised his head and said, Zhou Dao has already sent people to block all the important roads. It's impossible to escape. Master, what do you think we should do? Yi Chen said, Are we just going to drink and eat meat every day, and then watch our Mongolian brothers die in their sleep? Yi Yun took a deep breath and did not say anything. It's a pity that Fan Air isn't here. Yi Kong sighed. If he was here, and with the snake shadow sword in his hand, we definitely wouldn't be in such a passive situation. The snake shadow sword's cold energy was extremely strong, and it could easily freeze the ground. This way, the ninja army would not be able to sneak attack. Adding on Yi Fan's strange wind-like movement, he would definitely be able to heavily injure Zhou Dao's ninja army. Thinking to this point, Yi Kong shook his head. He had been in the Mongolian Empire for so long, and he did not know how his beloved son was doing. The three of them fell into silence again. Chinner, I had a strange dream last night. Since you're proficient in the art of divination, help me solve it. After a long time, Yi Yun broke off a withered branch and threw it into the fire, saying, Strange dream? What dream? Yi Chen asked Yi Yun. Last night I dreamed of a golden dragon flying into the tent. What is the meaning of this dream? Yi Yun asked Yi Chen. A golden dragon flying into the tent? When Yi Chen heard Yi Kong's words, his expression immediately changed. He put down the leather wineskin in his hand and asked in shock. Yi Yun nodded. A golden dragon flying into the tent, could it be that the emperor is going to personally lead the army? Yi Kong guessed. Yi Chen slowly shook his head. The emperor of the Great Ming dynasty had just escaped from prison, and in addition to that, he had been taking all kinds of pills made by Xuanji all year round. His body was already worn out, and it was impossible for him to lead the army. Could it be? Suddenly, Yi Chen's eyes lit up as he thought of a person. He stood up from the ground and quickly walked to the entrance of the tent. He opened the curtain and rushed to the open space outside the tent, and looked up at the vast starry sky. In Yi Kong's tent, the stars were shining brightly. So it's him. Yi Chen, who reeked of alcohol, smiled when he saw the stars shining with a strange light in Yi Kong's tent. He smiled as he quickly walked back into the tent. Once again, he sat by the fire, picked up the wine jug, and poured it down his throat. Yi Yun and Yi Kong looked at each other, not understanding why Yi Chen was laughing. The Emperor's star is here, so this matter should be resolved. Yi Chen put down the leather wineskin and smiled. The Emperor's star? Yi Kong asked with a frown. That's right. Yi Chen smiled mysteriously. Who is the Emperor's star? The current Emperor? Yi Yun asked. The true dragon, the son of heaven, might not be the Emperor's star, but the Emperor's star must be the son of heaven. Yi Chen lowered his voice and said to the father and son, This Emperor's star is none other than the current Crown Prince. Your Highness the Crown Prince? Yi Yun was shocked. Prepare to welcome him. The Crown Prince is on his way to the Mongolian Empire. It will take at most a day, but at least a few hours. Yi Chen smiled. The golden dragon that Master dreamed of last night is the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince is coming to the Mongolian Empire? Yi Kong asked with a frown. That's right, and he's coming to see you. Yi Chen smiled and took another sip of wine. He was like that. When he was sad, he drank. When he was happy, he drank. See me? Yi Yun's eyes widened. Ha ha. People say that the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of War, Yi Chen, is proficient in astronomy and astrology. Today, I see that you really live up to your reputation. Just as Yi Chen was about to explain to Yi Yun, a clear voice came from outside the tent. Whoosh! The flame of the candlestick placed on the wooden table suddenly soared high up into the air. It's the candlelight! Yi Chen exclaimed in his heart. If there was such a sign, it meant that a noble had arrived. Yi Chen, who had regained his senses, put down his wineskin. He stood up and said to Yi Yun and Yi Kong, "Quickly go and welcome him. The Crown Prince is here." Yi Yun and Yi Kong immediately stood up when they heard this. As they stood up, the two of them muttered in their hearts, "Why did the Crown Prince come? And how could he enter the heavily guarded Mongolian tent with such fanfare?" At this time, the great Ming Empire and the Mongolian Empire were like fire and water. Did the Mongolian soldiers not make things difficult for him? With these questions in mind, the father and son followed Yi Chun out of the tent. More than 10 feet away from the tent, a young man wearing a black dragon robe and a golden dragon crown walked over with a smile on his face. This person's face was like jade and his eyes were like stars. He walked with a majestic gait and a dignified aura. Behind him was an old eunuch. When the three of them saw this, their pupils shrank. What shocked them was not only the Crown Prince's arrival, but also the reaction of the surrounding Mongolian soldiers. Outside the heavily guarded Mongolian tent, nearly 1,000 valiant Mongolian soldiers did not move at all. They completely ignored the two people in front of them. It was as if the two of them did not exist. Then, they looked at the old eunuch behind the young man. He held a horsetail whisk in one hand and made a hand seal with the other. It was an illusion. When Yi Chun saw the mysterious hand seal made by the old eunuch, he was shocked. All the soldiers around the tent were under the illusion and could not see them at all. Chapter 584. Yi Chun greets Your Highness the Crown Prince. Yi Chun said as he knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the Crown Prince. "Greetings, Your Highness the Crown Prince. May Your Highness the Crown Prince live for 1,000 years." Yi Yun addressed the Crown Prince as 1,000 years. He followed Yi Chun and bowed to the Crown Prince. "Assistant Minister Yi, please rise. Both of you, please rise." The Crown Prince, dressed in a black dragon robe, walked slowly to the three kneeling men and said, "Thank you, Your Highness the Crown Prince." The three men slowly stood up with their hands by their side. "I met Assistant Minister Yi once when I was 7 years old. Do you still remember?" The Crown Prince asked Yi Chun with a smile. "Of course I remember." Yi Chun cupped his hands and said to the Crown Prince, "That day was Your Highness's birthday. His Majesty held a banquet for all the officials. I remember very clearly that Your Highness even toasted me. It's been more than 10 years. I didn't expect Assistant Minister Yi to still remember this." The Crown Prince smiled. "Your Highness is the Emperor's star that descended to the mortal world. How could I forget?" Yi Chun replied respectfully. The Crown Prince smiled and patted Yi Chun on the shoulder. "This must be the head of the Yi clan, old hero Yi Yun?" The Crown Prince looked at Yi Yun and asked. "Yi Yun greets Your Highness." Yi Yun lowered his head and replied, "Old hero Yi, I apologize for my lack of manners." The Crown Prince cupped his hands and said to Yi Yun, "I wouldn't dare." Yi Yun bowed in fear and trepidation. Then this must be the successor of the ethereal sword style, the Yi clan's once-in-a-century genius, the inverted scale sword Yi Kong? The Crown Prince asked as he looked at the refined Yi Yun standing behind Yi Kong. "Yi Kong greets Your Highness." Yi Kong cupped his hands and bowed to the Crown Prince in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. "You are indeed a dragon among men, Buffon," the Crown Prince said with a nod. "You flatter me, Your Highness," Yi Kong replied in a clear voice. "A dragon is toyed with by a prawn when he is out of the country, and a tiger is bullied by a dog when it is out of the country. The famous 3 heroes of the Yi family are now hiding in the Mongol Empire. This is the tragedy of the great Ming dynasty, the fault of the court and the death of the people." The Crown Prince looked at the 3 people of the Yi family in plain clothes and said emotionally, "Our Zhu family owes your Yi family too much. We have wronged you." In terms of financial resources, the Yi family's wealth was comparable to that of a country. In terms of connections, the Yi family had a respected status in the Jianghu, and no one dared to provoke them. In terms of ability, the Yi family had many experts, crouching tigers and hidden dragons. In terms of weapons, the Yi family was even more famous, and they were famous throughout China. With the strength of the Yi family, they could definitely establish their own territory and stand up to the imperial court. However, the Yi clan did not do so. Removal of officials, seizure of titles, confiscation of property, painting of portraits wanted everywhere. The Yi clan had suffered such great grievances, but the Yi clan still had the great Ming dynasty in their hearts and were loyal to their country. This kind of righteousness was comparable to the great Song dynasty's Yang clan. If the imperial court was filled with such loyal officials, how could there be such a situation? Thinking of this, the crown prince sighed in his heart. The crown prince's words were like soup splashed on snow, causing the hearts of the three people present to turn red. They had waited for these words for too long. Your Highness, the wind outside is cold. Come in and warm up. Yi Chen, whose eyes were red, used the sleeve of his Mongolian robe to wipe his eyes. As he spoke to the crown prince, he opened the curtain of the tent and invited the crown prince into the tent. Okay. The crown prince laughed heartily and walked into the tent. The three people followed him into the tent, and the old eunuch entered last. Oh, what a fragrant roasted lamb! Looks like I came at the right time. The crown prince rubbed his hands against the fire as he smiled and sat down beside it. This lamb will take a while. Your Highness, don't be anxious. Drink a cup of milk tea first to warm up. As Yi Chen spoke, he took out a large iron kettle and poured a large bowl of steaming milk tea. He handed it to the crown prince with both hands. It smells so good. The crown prince took the large bowl and smelled it under his nose. I don't know if your Highness is used to it. Yi Chen smiled. Let me try it. The crown prince said and took a few sips. Delicious, delicious. The crown prince laughed. Eunuch, you also have a bowl. Yi Chen poured another bowl and handed it to the old eunuch. This old eunuch was not ordinary, so Yi Chen did not dare to neglect him. This old servant is not thirsty. Thank you, Assistant Minister Yi. The old eunuch, who was standing behind the crown prince, waved his hand and smiled. Don't just stand there. Sit down. The crown prince said to the three people while drinking milk tea. Thank you, Your Highness, for granting us a seat. The three people said in unison and respectfully sat across from the crown prince. I came here in the middle of the night to ask you to return to the great Ming dynasty and help me. The crown prince looked at the three people and said, Return to the great Ming dynasty? Yi Chen asked the crown prince. That's right. The crown prince put down the milk tea in his hand and said, You have seen the current situation. Zhou Dao is relentlessly pursuing and attacking, and the four countries have turned the show into reality. A war is imminent. Right now, Imperial Father's health is not good and he needs to recuperate. Thus, I am in charge of all the affairs in the court. I am still young and have no experience in war. Once the war starts, I won't be able to deal with it calmly. Your Highness is too modest. Yi Chen cupped his hands and said to the crown prince, Your Highness is wise and wise. Who doesn't know that? With your Highness's ability, why can't you lead an army to war and command a battle? No. The crown prince waved his hand and said, Leading an army to war is an important matter for a monarch. If there is a slight mistake, tens of thousands of soldiers will die on the battlefield. The common people will also be plunged into misery and suffering. I can't joke about the lives of the soldiers and the common people. Yi Chen slowly nodded after hearing this. The crown prince was concerned about the common people and the life and death of the soldiers. In the future, he would definitely be a wise monarch. Your Highness has a lot of talented people in your hand. There are countless capable people. What can we, as martial artists, do to help your Highness? Yi Yun asked the crown prince. I want to ask the Yi family to help me fight against Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army. The crown prince went straight to the point. Ninja army? Yi Yun frowned. That's right. The Crown Prince looked around at the three people and said, I think you know better than me how strong Matsumoto Takayoshi's ninja army is. Right now, this army is attacking the four countries. Sooner or later, it will turn around and attack the Great Ming. As the saying goes, take precautions. We must make plans early to prevent the Great Ming soldiers from dying in vain in the future. But Your Highness, although the Yi family has many experts, there are less than 100 people who can fight against those ninjas. Moreover, in the recent few battles, we have already lost more than a dozen experts. Yi Yun frowned and said to the Crown Prince, As far as I know, the ninja army has nearly 10,000 people. There is a great disparity in the number of people on both sides. Using a few dozen experts to fight against nearly 10,000 experts is tantamount to suicide. The Yi family did have many experts, but it depended on who they were compared to. The ninjas under Matsumoto Takayoshi were specially trained to kill people. They were completely different from the experts of the Great Ming who pursued their own cultivation. Among the experts of the Yi family, there were less than 100 people, including the three of them, who could fight against the ninjas. In addition to the losses from the recent battles and the three people who betrayed the Yi family and were high-ranking Tibetan officials, there were less than a dozen people who could kill the ninjas. Old hero, don't worry. That's not what I meant. The Crown Prince smiled as he rubbed his hands to warm them. I have other intentions. The Crown Prince looked at Yi Chen as he spoke. Your Highness means? Yi Yun asked doubtfully. Bronze men. The Crown Prince spat out two words with a smile. Bronze men. When the three of them heard these two words, their expressions instantly changed. Yi Yun's eyes widened, Yi Kong looked shocked, and Yi Chen's pupils constricted. He finally understood why the Crown Prince was looking at him. The Bronze Man Atlas was one of the most powerful secret mechanisms in the Crouching Dragon manual passed down by his Yi family bloodline. Moreover, this atlas was listed as a supreme secret together with the Yi family's secret weaponsmithing manual, the weaponsmithing manual. Other than the person in charge of Yi Chen's branch and the previous heads of the Yi family, no one knew the secret of the Bronze Man Atlas's creation. Now, the Crown Prince was personally asking for this Bronze Man Atlas. Your Highness wants our Yi family's Bronze Man Atlas? Yi Yun asked the Crown Prince with a frown. It's not that I want it, but I want you to work day and night after returning to the Great Ming Dynasty to build a Bronze Man army for the Imperial Court specifically to deal with Matsumoto Takayoshi's ninja troop. The Crown Prince said solemnly to the three of them, As for the Bronze Man Atlas, that's your Yi family's secret. I definitely won't covet it. Bronze Man Army. When Yi Chen and Yi Kong heard these four words, they were shocked. They did not expect the Crown Prince to use this method to deal with Matsumoto Takayoshi's ninja troops. Yi Yun's expression was solemn and unperturbed. This was not the first time he had heard of the Bronze Man army. Back when he was in Tibet talking to Yilan, who had betrayed the Yi family, Yilan also wanted to obtain this Bronze Man Atlas and build an unparalleled Bronze Man army. Of course, if you don't agree, I'll think of another way. Everyone, there's no need to force yourself. When the Crown Prince saw the expressions of the three of them, he said, To be honest, I already have a way to deal with the ninjas. It's just that I thought of your Yi family's bronze men to be absolutely safe. I can agree to your Highness's request, but I have 3 requests. Yi Yun pondered for a moment before speaking. What request? Feel free to speak. When the Crown Prince heard that Yi Yun had agreed to this request, his eyes immediately lit up as he asked. Yi Chen and Yi Kong were also shocked as they looked at Yi Yun at the same time. Firstly, the bronze men can only be used to fight against Matsumoto Takayoshi's ninja troop. They cannot be used to fight against ordinary troop. If that's the case, it will harm the heavens and the Yi family will not be able to bear this sin. Yi Yun said, Old hero, don't worry. I can absolutely guarantee this. The Crown Prince said to Yi Yun. Secondly, The bronze men will be controlled by the Yi family. After they are used up, they will all be handed over to the Yi family to be smelted and destroyed. Not a single component can be left behind. Yi Yun continued. Yes, the Crown Prince replied. After the bronze men are used up, they will all be handed over to the Yi family to be destroyed. Not a single one can be left behind. Thirdly, the structure of the bronze men is extremely complicated. There are many types of materials needed. If you want to create a bronze man army, the imperial court must send someone to prepare the necessary materials and be available at any time. Yi Yun said as he looked at the Crown Prince. No problem. The Crown Prince replied. I'll allocate 3,000 craftsmen to the Yi family to help. Then, I'll send someone to prepare the materials. Everything needed will be satisfied. How many bronze men does your highness need? Yi Yun asked the Crown Prince. In Old Hero's opinion, how many bronze men do you need to fight against Matsumoto Takeyoshi's nearly 10,000 ninjas? The Crown Prince asked Yi Yun. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja troops have been surrounded and annihilated by nearly 1,000 experts from the 4 countries. There are only 9,000 left, Yi Yun said calmly. In my opinion, we need to create 900 bronze men. 900 bronze men? The Crown Prince said in shock. 1 bronze man can fight against 10? Chapter 585. On the coast of the East China Sea. Night. In the cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi held a candle in his hand and stood in front of the huge map hanging on the wall with a smile on his face. He kept nodding as he looked at it. He had just received the news that the troops of the 4 countries on the border had been defeated by the ninja army led by Zhou Dao, and were utterly defeated. According to his deduction, the next situation was that the troops of the 4 countries would unite and counterattack with all their strength. At that time, as long as he ordered Zhou Dao to avoid the battle, the fortress would be opened and the troops of the 4 countries would attack the Great Ming Dynasty like tigers coming down from the mountains. Thinking that the Great Ming Dynasty was about to be divided into pieces by the 4 countries, a vengeful smile appeared on his face. Knock, knock, knock. Just as Matsumoto Takeyoshi was looking at the border roads on the map, there was a rhythmic knocking sound outside the cabin door. Mr. Matsumoto, someone from the palace is here. There is something important to report to Mr. Matsumoto. The ninja guarding the door outside the cabin whispered. Someone from the palace? Matsumoto Takeyoshi turned his head with a puzzled expression. He didn't order the people in the Great Ming Dynasty's palace to come and see him. Why did they suddenly come here? Something happened. Something must have happened. Matsumoto Takeyoshi suddenly had an ominous premonition. Let him in. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. He turned around and put the candle in his hand on the wooden table, then sat down on the futon. Voila! The cabin door opened and a beautiful and dignified woman who looked like a palace maid quickly walked in from outside the cabin door. Matsumoto Takeyoshi saw this person and immediately frowned. This subordinate greets Lord. The woman knelt on one knee and lowered her head to greet Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Akiko? When Matsumoto Takeyoshi saw the woman's appearance, he was shocked. Lord, do you still remember Akiko? The woman raised her head and looked at Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Is it really you? Matsumoto Takeyoshi hurriedly stood up from the futon and walked over to the woman. He helped her up and asked, Why are you here? This woman was none other than one of Matsumoto Takeyoshi's personal maids, Chuan Akiko. She was one of Matsumoto Takeyoshi's most trusted people. Back then, Matsumoto Takeyoshi had sent him away with the excuse that he had accidentally broken the coral tree. However, on the surface, it seemed that she would never be used again. In fact, her identity was cleared and she was secretly sent to the Great Ming Imperial Palace as a palace maid. She was responsible for all the people placed in the Great Ming Imperial Palace. He had been gone for more than 10 years. Matsumoto Takeyoshi never thought that the person who came would be her. Lord, something has happened. Chuanakiko, who was dressed as a palace maid, stood up and said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, "All the spies that Lord placed in the great Ming imperial palace have been found out by the crown prince. When I saw that I was exposed, I escaped from the palace in the middle of the night." What? They were all found out? Matsumoto Takeyoshi was shocked when he heard this. This crown prince was indeed a ruthless character. He had actually found out all the spies that he had painstakingly placed in the great Ming imperial palace and uprooted them in such a short time. "Other than you, where are the others?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked anxiously. "Dead, they are all dead." A trace of sadness flashed through Chuanakiko's eyes. Palace maids, concubines, eunuchs, generals, a total of 83 experts have all committed suicide by taking poison. If it wasn't for the fact that I wanted to inform Lord of this news as soon as possible, Akiko would have. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face turned pale. He clenched his fists so tightly that they made cracking sounds. "Lord, Akiko still has something important to report." Chuanakiko, whose eyes were red, wiped her tears and said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, "What is it?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked with a frown. "The old emperor has already announced a general amnesty and handed over all the power of the great Ming Empire to the crown prince," Chuanakiko said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. After Matsumoto Takeyoshi heard this, his heart suddenly sank. It was said that this crown prince came from the emperor's star in the sky. He was extremely intelligent and loved the people as if they were his children. Now that the great Ming Empire's emperor had handed over all the power of the great Ming Empire to him, he was like a fierce tiger returning to the mountain or a trapped dragon returning to the sea. Also, does Lord know who leaked our secret to the crown prince? Chuanakiko gritted her teeth and asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Who? Matsumoto Takeyoshi narrowed his eyes and asked. The Maoshan sect leader, Lu Yuanshan. Chuanakiko said word by word. Lu Yuanshan? Matsumoto Takeyoshi was puzzled after hearing this. It's him? It's him. Chuanakiko said with hatred. If it wasn't for him, how could our people be exposed so easily? Moreover, they were uprooted and not a single one was left alive. Impossible. Matsumoto Takeyoshi shook his head and said, "It can't be him. Lord, you may not know this, but Lu Yuanshan is no longer the same as before. He has already become the great Ming Empire's state preceptor," Chuanakiko said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. The great Ming Empire's state preceptor? He became the great Ming Empire's state preceptor? Matsumoto Takeyoshi was shocked. That's right. Chuanakiko replied. I heard that the Crown Prince personally went to Mao Mountain to invite him. The Crown Prince personally went to Mao Mountain? Is this true? Matsumoto Takeyoshi felt more and more incredulous as he listened. Logically speaking, after Xuanji was caught, he would definitely tell the Crown Prince everything in detail in order to save his life. He and Lu Yuanshan had always been using each other, so it was impossible for him to cover up for Lu Yuanshan. Then again, even he was confessed, let alone the Maoshan sect leader. The Crown Prince didn't directly eliminate him, but instead let him become the great Ming Empire's state preceptor. How was this possible? This is absolutely true. Chuanakiko said solemnly, one of our people was among the 3,000 imperial guards who followed the Crown Prince to Mao Mountain. He saw this with his own eyes. 3,000 imperial guards followed the Crown Prince to Mao Mountain? Matsumoto Takeyoshi frowned after hearing this. Chuanakiko nodded. It seems that the Crown Prince went prepared for both sides. Matsumoto Takeyoshi thought. From this, it could be inferred that the Crown Prince already knew that Lu Yuanshan was a traitor. The reason why he let him become the state preceptor must be to use him. It must be that Xuanji who betrayed us. Otherwise, he wouldn't even be able to keep his life. How could he become the state preceptor with such a high position? Chuan Akiko gritted his teeth and said, I only hate that my cultivation is shallow and I am not his opponent. Otherwise, I would have taken his life before I left. This matter is very complicated. It is far from as simple as you think, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a frown. But master, you don't have to worry about this matter. I will send someone to investigate it clearly. Matsumoto Takeyoshi waved his hand and interrupted Chuan Akiko's words. Yes, master. Chuan Akiko bowed his head and replied. When you escaped this time, were you followed? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked. Don't worry, master. Chuan Akiko replied. When I came out, no one discovered me. Moreover, I took a long detour. It is absolutely safe. That's good. Matsumoto Takeyoshi nodded and said, Akiko, you have been hiding in the Ming dynasty's palace for more than 10 years and endured humiliation. It has been hard on you. As he spoke, he reached out and patted Chuan Akiko's shoulder. Go and rest first. If there is anything else, we will talk about it tomorrow. Yes, master. Chuan Akiko bowed to Matsumoto Takeyoshi and left. This crown prince is indeed a character. After Chuan Akiko left, the man in white who had been silent all this time said calmly. He was actually able to remove all the spies that Mr. carefully placed in the palace. This crown prince is brave and smart. He is extremely intelligent. He really can't be underestimated, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he walked back to the futon and sat down. He reached out and poured tea. If this person is not eliminated as soon as possible, he will definitely become a big problem in the future. The man in white said. He is the current crown prince. There are countless capable people around him. Killing him is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Matsumoto Takeyoshi put down the teapot and said, What's so difficult about that? The man in white said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, Mr. can let Yi Fan do this. With his current cultivation, killing a crown prince is as easy as flipping his hand. I have a prior agreement with Yi Fan. He won't kill for me, let alone the current crown prince. Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up the fragrant tea and took a sip. Even if we don't let him kill people, we can still let him go and investigate. The white-robed man said, The great Ming's imperial court is stripping the Yi family of their position and seizing their power. That Yi Fan might be angry this time and start a massacre. Anyway, it's much better than idling in the Eastern Sea. That's true. Matsumoto Takeyoshi held the teacup in his hand and nodded slightly. Instead of letting Yi Fan idling in the East Sea, it was better to let him run errands and do some simple but troublesome things. Someone, go to the boat and invite Mr. Yi over. Tell him that there is something important to discuss with him, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. Yes. The ninja guarding the door outside the cabin responded. Inside the sleeping cabin, Yi Fan held a brush in his hand and dipped it in thick ink. He wrote and drew on a scroll that was spread out on the wooden table. He had already obtained the patterns of the 3 divine cauldrons. In order to make it easier for him to comprehend them, he drew all the patterns and characters in his mind onto the scroll. Swish, 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 the sound of a movement technique breaking through the air came from outside the cabin. Yi Fan continued to draw the patterns on the cauldrons without any reaction. He already knew who it was. It was none other than Ishii. Ever since he separated from Akatsuki, his 3 meals had returned to normal. Ishii was in charge of delivering food. Mr. Yi, Mr. Matsumoto invites you over. He says that he has something important to discuss with you. Ishii's voice came from outside the cabin. Got it. I'll be right there, Yi Fan said as he put down the brush in his hand, picked up the scroll, and gently blew dry the ink. Yes, Mr. Yi, Ishii said as he turned around and used his movement technique to rush back to the warship to report on his mission. Let's go, Xiao Zhao. Let's go take a look. Yi Fan rolled up the scroll and put it into his sleeve. He picked up Baihu and stood up. With a wave of his sleeve, he instantly disappeared. "He's here," the white-robed man standing behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi said calmly in the cabin. Swish. Just as the white-robed man finished speaking, a green light instantly appeared in front of Matsumoto Takeyoshi out of thin air. Amidst the brilliance, the silver-haired, black-robed Yi Fan slowly walked out with a smile on his face. "May I know why Mr. Matsumoto has summoned me here so late at night?" Yi Fan said as he sat on the futon opposite Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a smile. The moment he sat down, Yi Fan raised his eyebrows and glanced at the white-robed man. His eyes were deep and empty. The white-robed man's eyes were slightly lowered as he remained motionless. Chapter 586. The next day. Night. High up in the sky, Yi Fan was stepping on the auspicious clouds. Above his head, the stars were shining brightly. He was moving as fast as lightning in the direction of the capital city. Baihu, whose body was covered by Yi Fan's spiritual energy shield, was quietly standing on Yi Fan's shoulder. From time to time, she would raise her head to look at the bright stars in the sky. Yi Fan was not in the mood to appreciate the beautiful night. Instead, he was constantly pondering over the words that Matsumoto Takeyoshi had said to him. Although Matsumoto Takeyoshi had given him the task of investigating the Crown Prince's next move, he could hear that Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words vaguely hinted that he wanted him to get rid of the Crown Prince. Although this meaning was not explicitly stated, Yi Fan had a very deep impression of the current Crown Prince. Although this person was about the same age as him, the way he did things was clean and efficient. He was not at all like those nobles, who were extravagant and licentious. This was the scheme that the Crown Prince had set up to kill Zhou Dao. It was closely linked, step by step, and seemed unrelated. In fact, there was a hidden killing intent. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have imagined that such a shocking scheme would come from such a young person. They were all of the same age. Compared to this person, his mental strength and mind were simply worlds apart. No wonder Matsumoto Takeyoshi valued this person so much. With this person's status and wisdom, if he had the help of an expert, he would definitely have the strength to fight against Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Hong Long, as Yi Fan was thinking, the sky in the distance was covered with dense clouds. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. A rainstorm was coming, and below the black clouds was the capital city. "Xiao Zhao, sit tight. I'm going to speed up." Yi Fan turned his head and said to Baihu. When Baihu heard this, she was shocked at first. Then, she immediately hugged Yi Fan's neck tightly with her front claws and grabbed Yi Fan's collar with her back claws. She stuck close to Yi Fan, afraid that she would fall from the sky when Yi Fan used his strange movement technique. It knew the speed of Yi Fan's movement after he entered the demonic state. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was as fast as lightning. When she heard Yi Fan say to speed up, Baihu's heart began to race. "Don't worry, it won't take long." Seeing that Baihu was facing a formidable enemy, Yi Fan smiled and patted Baihu's head. Then, he activated his primordial spirit, Devil Spirit. Buzz! Yi Fan's figure instantly transformed into a dazzling green star, and a long tail of light instantly tore through Yi Kong. Whoosh! The thick clouds in the sky were instantly cut open by Yi Fan's movement technique, creating a path of clouds that was more than 3 feet wide. The cloud path was quickly dispersed. Before Baihu could close her eyes, she saw the surrounding things instantly distort and transform into various colors of light that swept past her at high speed. At this moment, if it were not for Yi Fan's spiritual energy barrier protecting her body, she would have been torn apart by Yi Fan's speed. Whoosh! Before Xiao Zhao could blink 3 times, Yi Fan's figure suddenly stopped. Baihu lowered her head and was surprised to find that the capital city, which was thousands of miles away, was already under her feet. Although she had never been to the capital city, she had heard of the imperial palace. Below it there was a large group of majestic buildings. They were majestic and dignified. Without even guessing, they knew that this was the legendary forbidden imperial palace. "Come, let's go down," Yi Fan said, and his figure instantly disappeared. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yi Fan appeared above a luxurious and imposing building. This was none other than the Crown Prince's palace that he had been to last time. Yi Fan crouched down and picked up Baihu, who was tightly lying on his shoulder, and gently placed her on the golden roof. Baihu's eyes lit up as she looked around excitedly. She had never been to the imperial palace before, so she was naturally very curious about everything here. "Shoo!" Yi Fan raised his index finger to his lips and made a shushing gesture to Baihu, who was excitedly wagging her tail. Baihu blinked her clear eyes and nodded at Yi Fan. Yi Fan smiled and gently lifted up the glazed roof. An orange light shone out from the hole that he had used his heat energy to penetrate the roof last time. Yi Fan looked down. The main hall was brightly lit. Dressed in a golden robe, the Crown Prince held a red brush in his hand and seriously read through memorials. On the exquisite wooden table in front of him, bundles of bamboo slips were piled up like a small mountain. An elderly eunuch stood quietly beside the Crown Prince, holding a horsetail whisk. Everything was as Matsumoto Takeyoshi had said. The Crown Prince was already in control of the country and had even begun to read through memorials. Crash! The Crown Prince threw out the bamboo slips in his hand. At the bottom of the steps in front of him, there were already more than a dozen bamboo slips thrown there. "A bunch of flattering dogs," the Crown Prince angrily said. "Seeing that I am in control of the imperial power, you all came to flatter me. Your Highness, please calm down." The old eunuch advised the Crown Prince. Most of the officials in the imperial court were promoted by Zhou Dao and Xuanji. Now that the tree has fallen, the monkeys have scattered, so they naturally want to find a new backer. "Backer? Humph," the Crown Prince sneered. "Aren't they afraid that this mountain of mine will crush them to death?" The old eunuch smiled, but did not speak. "Fuline, pass down the order. All the officials in the imperial court are to come to me within half an hour," the Crown Prince said as he picked up a bamboo slip from the wooden table and opened it to read. "Your Highness, it is already late. If there is anything to say, we can talk about it tomorrow morning. Your health is more important," the old eunuch said to the Crown Prince. "Today's matter, today's end," the Crown Prince said to the old eunuch without raising his head as he used a red brush to mark the bamboo slips. "I am only in my 20s and am not so delicate. Quickly go and handle the edict." "Yes," the old eunuch said, slowly walked to the door and whispered a few words to the eunuch guarding the door. After the eunuch finished listening, he nodded and flew away. "Your Highness, forgive this old servant for speaking out of turn." After the old eunuch returned to the Crown Prince's side, he said, "Your Highness has just taken power and has not yet ascended the throne. Summoning all the officials in the imperial court in the middle of the night will not benefit your Highness in the future when you inherit the throne." "I understand your meaning." The Crown Prince raised his head to glance at the old eunuch, then continued to read the memorials. "But now the country is in great trouble, and the people are about to suffer. I can no longer care so much. If I do not remove these black sheep from the imperial court, the Ming dynasty will sooner or later be destroyed by their hands. But your Highness, have you ever thought about how many people will be left in the imperial court after we get rid of all these flatterers and corrupt people? I fear that there will not even be 7 or 8 left," the old eunuch said with a grave expression. "In this way, there will be a large number of empty officials, and the imperial court will be paralyzed." The old eunuch had already guessed what the Crown Prince wanted to do. This Crown Prince was too focused on governing and did not want to waste a moment. But the corruption and muddle-headedness of the imperial court officials could not be resolved in a day or two. It was impossible for the Crown Prince to change this situation in a short period of time. Fu Lin, you are wrong. After the crown prince heard the old eunuch's words, he gently put down the brush, raised the fragrant tea to his mouth, and took a sip. The imperial court being paralyzed is not scary. What is scary is that it is rotten to the bone and they do not know it. The Ming dynasty is like a sick tiger. It only has a set of claws and teeth, but it does not have the power to shake the mountains and forests. If we do not use strong medicine, it will not just be a problem of paralysis, but the destruction of the country and the destruction of the family. Chapter 587. The Crown Prince put down his teacup and continued, "What we need to do now is to get rid of the rotten flesh and get rid of the sores and warts. At the same time, we need to strengthen our foundation and rebuild our flesh and blood. These so-called important officials in the court are the backbone of the great Ming dynasty. If one official is corrupted, thousands of commoners will suffer. If 10 officials are corrupted, half of the great Ming dynasty's sky will collapse. If the officials are gone, we can promote them based on merit, but if the people's hearts are gone, then we have nothing left. Today, not to mention a dozen officials, even if the entire court is oppressing the commoners, I will still kill them without hesitation." Bang! As the Crown Prince spoke, he slammed his palm on the wooden table. The Crown Prince was going to start a massacre tonight. The old eunuch was shocked. Well said. In the hall, Yi Fan secretly applauded the Crown Prince's words. He originally thought that the great Ming dynasty was beyond cure. Now, it seemed that there was still a ray of hope. "Your Highness is wise and far-sighted. This old servant is inferior," the old eunuch said to the Crown Prince. "In a moment, when everyone is here, you order people to bring up the evidence of their crimes. Let them be convinced," the Crown Prince said calmly. "And then?" The old eunuch looked up at the Crown Prince and asked, "How should we deal with them?" "Kill," the Crown Prince said. "Yes," the old eunuch replied. "Let them die cleanly and don't dirty this place," the Crown Prince continued. "As for their wives and children, don't implicate them. Leave them a way out." "This old servant understands," the old eunuch bowed. On the roof of the hall, Yi Fan nodded repeatedly. This Crown Prince not only had thunderous Vajra means, but he also had the heart of a bodhisattva. He was indeed a rare and wise ruler. Whoosh! The dark clouds in the sky became thicker and thicker. In the blink of an eye, a torrential downpour poured down. Yi Fan circulated his spiritual energy and activated the water avoidance pearl in his pocket. Buzz! A light sphere that was 10 meters in size appeared around Yi Fan, enveloping him and the white fox, Xiao Zhao, as well as the hole in the main hall in an instant. In less than an hour, more than 20 officials dressed in court attire and holding umbrellas entered the Crown Prince's palace. "They are here, Your Highness," the old eunuch said to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince put down the brush in his hand and leaned back in his chair. His expression was cold as he looked at the officials walking in. After the ministers entered the door, they put away their oilcloth umbrellas and lined up neatly in a wet line, kneeling in front of the Crown Prince. "This humble subject kowtows in salute to Your Highness the Crown Prince. May Your Highness live for thousands of years." The Crown Prince picked up his teacup and drank his tea quietly. The ministers kneeling on the ground looked at each other, not knowing what the Crown Prince was up to. However, they weren't stupid. The dozen or so bamboo slips that had been thrown in front of them told them that the Crown Prince had summoned them in the middle of the night for no good reason. On the other hand, the ministers kneeling at the back were calm and composed. "Everyone rise." The Crown Prince put down his teacup and said calmly, "Thank you, Your Highness." The ministers stood up and stood on either side of the Crown Prince. "Is everyone asleep?" The Crown Prince looked at the ministers who were soaked by the rain and smiled. "Am I disturbing everyone? This humble subject doesn't dare." The ministers replied in unison. "This time, I summoned all of you here to show you something." The Crown Prince glanced at the old eunuch beside him. The old eunuch understood and waved his hand. Immediately, 4 junior eunuchs carried a large wooden box in from the side room. Bang! The wooden box landed heavily on the ground. The ministers looked at each other, not knowing what was in the box. "Show it to them." The crown prince's voice was cold. When the 4 junior eunuchs heard the crown prince's words, they quickly opened the box. All the ministers craned their necks to look inside. Inside the wooden box, there were at least a dozen large paper seals with the names of the ministers on them. "What is this?" the ministers muttered in their hearts. The 4 junior eunuchs distributed the thick paper seals to the dozen or so ministers according to the names on them. Among the ministers, only the 8 people standing at the back didn't get a paper seal. The others all got a copy. "Open it and see." The crown prince smiled. "Yes." The ministers answered and opened the paper seals in their hands. They took out the papers and looked carefully. However, when they saw the contents of the papers in their hands, their expressions changed greatly and their faces turned ashen. The papers in their hands were densely packed with records of all the crimes they had committed since they entered the court. Corruption, abuse of the people, forming cliques for personal gain, and betraying the country. Accepting bribes, buying official positions, cheating for personal gain, colluding with officials and merchants, one by one, the time, place, person involved, amount of money, testimony, everything was there. Cold sweat appeared on the foreheads of the ministers. The evidence was irrefutable. At this time, they couldn't even say a word of rebuttal. In the hall, it was so quiet that the sound of a needle dropping on the ground could be heard. "What else do you have to say?" The crown prince looked at the panic-stricken ministers and asked calmly. "I am guilty. Your Highness, please be merciful and spare my life." The leader of the ministers cried and said. His legs went soft and he knelt on the ground. "I am guilty. I know I was wrong. Your Highness, please spare my life." The psychological defense of the ministers completely collapsed. They knelt on the ground and cried. They were very clear about the crown prince's way of doing things. He did business according to the rules and didn't care about personal feelings. If a prince broke the law, he would be punished the same as the commoners. They thought that they could retire and return to their hometown before the old emperor abdicated and live the rest of their lives comfortably. Now it seemed that they were wrong, very wrong. "Seeing that you have done good for the country, I will let your wives and children go." The crown prince slowly closed his eyes. "You can go in peace. Your Highness, please spare my life. Your Highness, I don't want to die. Your Highness, I am willing to atone for my sins," the ministers wailed. The old eunuch made a hand sign and his eyes widened. Thump, thump, more than a dozen ministers instantly stopped breathing and fell to the ground in a disorderly manner. Yi Fan, who was on the roof, was dumbfounded when he saw this. What kind of technique did the old eunuch use? He actually took the lives of more than 10 people without a sound. "You can all go back." The crown prince opened his eyes and said to the 8 stunned ministers, We will leave." The 8 ministers stammered and walked out of the hall. They even forgot to take their umbrellas. They were completely frightened. Chapter 588. What an expert! Yi Fan thought to himself as he frowned on the roof. Now that his spiritual energy was profound and he had obtained the power of the heavenly demon, his breathing was slow and steady. Coupled with the thunder and lightning outside, and the torrential rain pouring down, even a top expert would not be able to discover his tracks while he was inside the light sphere. Yet, this old eunuch was still able to detect his presence. There was no need to guess. This old eunuch had already discovered his whereabouts. It was just that he had business to attend to, so he did not point out his hiding place. Who would have thought that there was such a person in the palace? Yi Fan thought to himself as he picked up the white fox beside him. In an instant, he turned into a ray of dazzling green light and zigzagged down the bowl-sized hole on the roof of the main hall and flew into the main hall. Whoosh! Yi Fan appeared out of thin air in the main hall with Baihu in his arms. Since the other party had already discovered him, there was no need for him to continue hiding. The old eunuch narrowed his eyes as he looked at the silver-haired, black-robed young man holding Baihu in his arms. His expression suddenly changed. The green radiance on Yi Fan's forehead, which was overflowing with light, shocked him greatly. This person was already a member of the demon realm. The golden-robed crown prince also frowned at Yi Fan's appearance. He had never seen anyone who could transform into a ray of light and appear. This person's cultivation was so high that he had never seen or heard of it. If he guessed correctly, this person should be the expert sent by Matsumoto Takeyoshi to assassinate him. Who are you? Why are you sneaking around in the main hall and peeping into the crown prince's palace? The old eunuch holding a horsetail whisk said coldly. I am the 68th generation of the Yi family's great-grandson, Yi Fan. Yi Fan said calmly to the old eunuch as he reached out to stroke Baihu. Yi Fan. The old eunuch frowned. You are Yi Fan? Yes, Yi Fan replied. The old eunuch turned around and looked at the crown prince. You are Yi Kong's son, Yi Yun's grandson, Snake Shadow Sword Yi Fan? The crown prince's face was filled with shock. He stood up from the main seat and asked in shock. What? Does your highness recognize me? Yi Fan frowned and asked. After getting up, the crown prince walked down the stairs and slowly walked in front of Yi Fan. He circled Yi Fan and sized him up. Yi Fan stared at the crown prince, motionless. After looking around, the crown prince nodded slowly. His silver hair was like snow, his eyes were like stars, his face was like jade, and his hair was like a knife. His temperament was extraordinary, and his cultivation was unfathomable. Beside him was a Baihu. The young man in front of him was exactly the same as the one Yi Kong had described to him in the Mongolian tent a few days ago. This person was the peerless cultivator, the owner of the fleeting fire sword and the snake shadow sword, Yi Fan. Bu Fan was indeed a dignified man. The crown prince thought to himself. You didn't come to the crown prince palace in the middle of the night to assassinate me and avenge your Yi clan, did you? As the crown prince spoke, he stood in front of Yi Fan and looked at Yi Fan with a calm gaze. If I wanted to kill you, I would have done it openly. I wouldn't hide. Yi Fan lowered his head and stroked the white fox's silky fur as he spoke to the crown prince without even lifting his head. Oh? Ha. The crown prince was surprised at first, but then he smiled and said, You are just as your father said, arrogant and unruly, different from the rest. Your highness has seen my father. Yi Fan's expression changed when he heard the crown prince say this. He raised his brows and asked the crown prince. Ha. I've seen more than just your father, the crown prince said with a smile. I've seen your grandfather Yi Yun and your uncle Yi Qin. What did you do to them? Yi Fan asked the crown prince with a frown. His voice was cold. He was worried that his father and the other two had been held hostage by the crown prince. Don't worry, they are very safe, the crown prince said with a smile. If my guess is correct, they should be on their way back to the Ming dynasty. If everything goes smoothly, they will reach the Ming dynasty in a few days. Reach the Ming dynasty? Yi Fan was confused. A few days ago, I made a trip to Mongolia and saw your 3 relatives with my own eyes. I even ate roast lamb and drank strong wine with them. It was very satisfying. The crown prince turned around with a smile. He shook his golden robe and sat back down on the sandalwood chair behind the wooden table. Your highness went to Mongolia to find them? Yi Fan asked with a frown. Why? I sent people to investigate your Yi family. The so-called forming of cliques and privately minting money were all nonsense. As for your father and the others breaking into the palace at night and plotting to assassinate Imperial Father, they were all framed by that dog Xuanji. The crown prince took a sip of tea and continued, This time, I went to Mongolia to see the 3 of them. First, it was to clear the Yi family's name and reverse the case. Second, it was to ask the Yi family to help me deal with Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ninja army? Yi Fan was shocked. Feline, tell him in detail, the Crown Prince said to the old eunuch as he drank tea. Yes, Your Highness. The old eunuch turned to Yi Fan and told him how the Crown Prince secretly contacted the 4 countries to kill Zhou Dao, how he failed at the last minute, how Zhou Dao used his skills to make the ninja army attack the 4 countries' army, and how he led the 4 countries to turn their act into reality. He told Yi Fan everything. After hearing this, Yi Fan's eyes widened and his face was full of disbelief. He didn't expect things to develop to this point. That Matsumoto Takeyoshi was indeed sinister and vicious. He actually used force to turn the situation around. Mr. Yi, I have a presumptuous request, the Crown Prince said to Yi Fan, who was standing there with a frown. What is it? Yi Fan frowned and raised his head to look at the Crown Prince. Mr. Ye's cultivation is extremely high, and you're also a dragon of the Yi family. Can you stay by my side and assist me in quelling the rebellion? The Crown Prince asked Yi Fan. Yi Fan was a member of the Yi family, and his cultivation was so heaven-defying. If he was used by the Crown Prince, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. Thirsty for talent, the Crown Prince extended an olive branch to Yi Fan. When the Crown Prince said this, Yi Fan was first stunned, then he couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. He had originally come to find out about the Crown Prince's movements, but he had unexpectedly been chosen by the Crown Prince. Why is Mr. Yi smiling? The Crown Prince asked when he saw Yi Fan's bitter smile. He put down the fragrant tea in his hand. Does Your Highness not want to know why I'm here? Yi Fan looked at the Crown Prince and asked. The Crown Prince frowned and looked at Yi Fan in confusion. Matsumoto Takeyoshi ordered me to find out about Your Highness's movement. If the time is right, I'll take Your Highness's life, Yi Fan said calmly as he looked at the Crown Prince. When the old eunuch heard Yi Fan's words, his expression changed, and he raised his head to look at Yi Fan. You're one of Matsumoto Takeyoshi's men? The Crown Prince asked Yi Fan in shock. He had never imagined that this member of the Yi family, who had heaven-defying cultivation, would be working for Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Yi Fan nodded slowly. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Since that's the case, why aren't you doing anything? The Crown Prince asked with a frown. I never had any intention of killing you, Yi Fan said to the Crown Prince. Just now, I saw that Your Highness sympathizes with the common people and loves them like your own children. You have the heart of a bodhisattva and the methods of a vajra, so I don't want to kill you. You're the savior of the great Ming dynasty. It's the common people's fortune to have such a good emperor like you. I don't understand, the Crown Prince said as he looked at Yi Fan with a confused expression. What does Your Highness not understand? Yi Fan asked in return. Since you have such a state of mind, why are you helping the evildoer do evil and helping that vicious traitor Matsumoto Takeyoshi? The Crown Prince asked the question in his heart. I have my own difficulties. Yi Fan lowered his gaze and spoke. His voice was filled with helplessness. Difficulties? The Crown Prince asked in return. Yes. What difficulties would make you do such a thing? The Crown Prince asked. Status? Status? Wealth? Forgive me for being blunt. With Mr. Ye's abilities, it's impossible for you to defect to the enemy for these things. It's not these, it's not, Yi Fan said softly as he shook his head with a sorrowful expression. Then what is it? The Crown Prince asked. The things that Matsumoto Takeyoshi has. The great Ming dynasty has everything. He really wanted to know why Yi Fan was willing to work for Matsumoto Takeyoshi. It's my wife, Yi Fan said as he told the Crown Prince everything about his beloved wife, Fujiwara no Chiko. Bang! Shameless! After hearing Yi Fan's words, the Crown Prince was instantly enraged. He slammed the table and stood up. The old eunuch also frowned after hearing this, but he didn't say a word. Right now, I can only think of a way to find the 9 cauldrons. Only then can I save my wife's 2 true souls. Yi Fan said to the Crown Prince, I appreciate your Highness' good intentions, but your Highness can rest assured. I won't help Matsumoto Takeyoshi harm the people of the great Ming dynasty. Once I gather the 9 cauldrons and save Chico, your Highness won't have to do anything. I'll directly take his life. What is love? It's something that can lead to life and death. Ai, it's been hard on you. The Crown Prince shook his head and sighed. Since ancient times, how many infatuated men and resentful women had been trapped by love. Even if this young man's cultivation was heaven-defying, he couldn't escape love. If Matsumoto Takeyoshi has any important news, I'll think of a way to inform your Highness. Yi Fan cupped his hands and said to the Crown Prince, If your Highness sees my father and the others again, please don't tell them about me. Since ancient times, it was difficult to be loyal and filial at the same time. But now, he couldn't do it at all. Don't worry, I won't tell them. The Crown Prince frowned and said to Yi Fan, Then, your Highness, take care. I'll be leaving. Yi Fan said, then turned and prepared to leave. Wait a moment. The Crown Prince called out to Yi Fan from behind. Yi Fan turned and looked at the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince walked in front of Yi Fan and removed a 7-treasure jade pendant from his waist. He extended his hand and handed it to Yi Fan. Your Highness, this is... Yi Fan didn't understand the Crown Prince's intention. This is the jade pendant that I've carried with me since I was young. My name is on it. The Crown Prince said to Yi Fan. Take this jade pendant. It might be useful to you in the future. Yi Fan took the jade pendant with both hands and held it in his hand. The jade pendant shone brightly with the Crown Prince's name engraved on it. Seeing this jade pendant is like seeing His Highness, the Crown Prince. The old eunuch reminded Yi Fan, You should understand the importance of this item. Yi Fan's expression changed when he heard this. With this jade pendant, it was equivalent to having an imperial sword. I'll tell you another secret. The Crown Prince moved his head close to Yi Fan's ear and whispered, There's a cauldron in Tibet. Chapter 589. After Yi Fan left, the golden-robed Crown Prince asked the old eunuch, Fulin, compared to this person's cultivation, which is higher and which is lower? The old eunuch holding the horsetail whisk slowly shook his head. What, you are not a match for him? The Crown Prince asked the old eunuch, his tone slightly shocked. Your Highness does not know, but this person has already entered the demonic path. If this old servant fought with him, perhaps I could delay for a while, but in the end I would be defeated by this person, the old eunuch said with a grave expression. The Crown Prince's expression was shocked, and his heart shook. He knew that this Yi Fan's cultivation was extremely high, but he had not thought that it would be so powerful that even Fulin would not be a match for him. Your Highness, you should rejoice that this person is not our enemy, otherwise. The old eunuch holding the horsetail whisk looked at the Crown Prince and did not continue. While this person is cold and unruly, he is a person of affection and righteousness. The Crown Prince stood with his hands behind his back, shook his head and sighed. I hope he can find the 9 cauldrons and save his wife. He didn't know why, but he felt a sense of empathy towards Yi Fan. I can see that he has a good impression of your Highness, the old eunuch said to the Crown Prince. Perhaps, the Crown Prince said. Just now, if he had discovered that I was a licentious Crown Prince, presumably, my head would have fallen to the ground. Everything is as you say, I am relatively lucky. This person can be of use to your Highness, it is your Highness' blessing, the old eunuch said. It is reasonable to receive this person's help. I say, Fulin, when did you learn to flatter? The Crown Prince said, as he turned to look at the old eunuch with a smile. This old servant is not flattering, the old eunuch said with a smile. This old servant is speaking the truth. Don't say this, hurry and order people to take care of these corpses, and then seal the hole in the hall, the crown prince said with a smile. This old servant will do it now. The old eunuch smiled and turned to leave. Yi Fan. The crown prince raised his head to look at the hole in the roof of the hall and slowly murmured to himself. High in the sky, a large white auspicious clouds flew quickly in the direction of Tibet. Tibet has a cauldron. The crown prince's words made him go wild with joy. There was no time to lose. He had to rush to Tibet immediately. Now, he was no longer the only one looking for the cauldron. More than a dozen masters sent by Matsumoto Takeyoshi, as well as the mysterious old man from the Song dynasty, were all looking for the 9 divine objects. He had to find it before they did. However, in the midst of his excitement, Yi Fan began to worry again. Tibet was so big, where was he going to find it? That place was remote, and he did not speak the language, so he had no idea where to start. The only time he went to Tibet was when he went to the Great Snow Mountain to save Xiao Zhao. Wait a minute. Yi Fan had a flash of inspiration. Didn't Xiao Zhao grow up in Tibet? Although it was now Baihu and couldn't speak, it had once told him that its parents often brought it to the temple on the Great Snow Mountain to listen to scriptures. Since that was the case, why didn't he ask the Lama in the temple for help? Although it had been more than 300 years since that time, the prince and the yellow-robed Taoist had been killed by his previous life's eldritch. It had caused a sensation for a time. He believed that the Lama in the temple would not forget this matter. Let's do it this way. Go to the Lama temple on the Great Snow Mountain. Xiao Zhao, let's go to the Great Snow Mountain of Tibet, your hometown, okay? Yi Fan turned his head and asked Baihu, who was lying on his shoulder and looking around inside the spiritual energy shield. Woo! When Xiao Zhao heard Yi Fan say that he was going to take it to the Great Snow Mountain of Tibet, its eyes immediately lit up. It raised its head excitedly and looked at Yi Fan with a pair of clear and transparent eyes. You told me about the temple where your family went to listen to scriptures. Do you still remember? Yi Fan asked Baihu. Baihu nodded. That was the place that left the deepest impression on it. How could it forget? Let's go there now. You lead the way, Yi Fan said to Baihu. In less than an hour, the man and the fox arrived in the sky above the Great Snow Mountain of Tibet. Under the auspicious clouds, the mountains rose and fell endlessly. Although it was not winter yet, there was snow all year round. As far as the eye could see, it was a vast expanse of white. Yi Fan focused his eyes and looked around. According to Xiao Zhao's indication, the temple should not be far from here. Soon, he found the Lama temple. On the cliff of the highest mountain 500 miles away, a vermilion building came into Yi Fan's sight. It seemed a little abrupt. On the plaque on the door there were a few golden Tibetan characters. There was no need to guess. It must be the Lama temple. The reason was very simple. Other than the royal family, only the temples could use vermilion. Yi Fan was delighted. He urged the auspicious clouds under his feet and flew quickly in the direction of the temple. However, when he was less than 3 miles away from the temple, Yi Fan suddenly felt that the auspicious clouds under his feet began to lose their lift and slowly spread out. At the same time, Yi Fan suddenly felt a splitting headache. It was as if something was going to rush out of his brain. Ugh! He covered his forehead with both hands, his face full of pain. Buzz! In between his eyebrows, the inverted swastika written with a green glow suddenly turned blood red. Ugh! Yi Fan's eyes were bloodshot. His face was ferocious, and he let out a low and painful roar. Ugh! Ugh! Baihu, who was lying on Yi Fan's shoulder, was frightened by the scene in front of her. She let out a low cry of panic. Yi Fan was fine just a moment ago. How did he become like this? Baihu looked anxiously at Yi Fan, who was in great pain. She did not know what to do. Whoosh! Just as Yi Fan was in great pain, the auspicious clouds under his feet completely lost their lift and disappeared. Whoosh! A man and a fox suddenly fell from the clouds. The wind whistled in his ears. The air was bone-chilling cold. Yi Fan, who was in great pain, was somewhat awakened by the cold air. When he saw himself falling from the clouds, he endured the splitting headache and fiercely urged the spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy. Buzz! A five-colored brilliance spread from his body, and the speed of his fall began to slow down. Even so, he still had a terrible headache, and he fell uncontrollably to the ground. After a while, the man and the fox landed on a thick layer of snow. Huff! Huff! Yi Fan sat down on a rock in the snow and panted heavily. Xiao Zhao jumped down from Yi Fan's shoulder and looked nervously at Yi Fan's pale face. I'm fine, Yi Fan said to Baihu while gasping for breath. Baihu tilted her head and looked at Yi Fan. She did not know what had happened. What was going on? Why did the auspicious clouds suddenly lose their lift? Why did he have a splitting headache and was in so much pain? He clearly remembered that when the auspicious clouds dissipated, his heavenly demon power did not react. Even when he used the pure spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy, he could not completely control his body and could only slowly descend. Why was it like this? Yi Fan thought as he checked the spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy. The spiritual energy was still abundant, but it could only circulate in his body and could not be released. Seeing this, Yi Fan was stunned at first. Then, he subconsciously closed his eyes and checked his primordial spirit demon soul. Yi Fan was shocked when he used his inner vision. His pupils shrank and he was dumbfounded. He suddenly realized that the heavenly demon power in his primordial spirit had been completely suppressed by a golden aura. The golden aura on the green and red human-shaped primordial spirit had completely suppressed the evil energy in his primordial spirit and the dazzling red heavenly demon power in his primordial spirit. The two great powers of evil and demon could not move at all. Yi Fan opened his eyes and his face was pale. The two great powers were sealed, and the spiritual energy in his sea of vital energy could not be released. At this time, he was no different from a normal person. If a strong enemy appeared at this time, he might not even have the power to fight back. Thinking of this, he checked the two inner cores in his body. After checking, Yi Fan breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the Fire Snake Dragon Ball and the Ice Core were operating as usual. Yi Fan used the alchemy method that Cui Ziwen had taught him. He activated the Fire Snake Dragon Ball in his sea of vital energy and hit the open ground with his palm. Whoosh! A red beam of light as thick as the mouth of a bowl. It gushed out from his palm. Boom! A loud sound was heard. Heat waves rolled and water vapor filled the air. On the snowy ground that was filled with thick snow, there was a huge pit that was 10 feet deep. Green smoke and water vapor were gushing out of the pit. Yi Fan thought that the inner cores could still be used. If there was a strong enemy at this time, he should be able to deal with it for a while with the two inner cores and the divine weapon in his hand. With this in mind, Yi Fan began to think about why his spiritual energy was suppressed. Just what was that golden light? How could it possess such power? Also, where did the golden light come from? Why did it suppress the spiritual energy in his body? Could it be that there was a sneak attack by an expert? Impossible. If there was such an ability, they could have subdued him directly. Why did they have to be sneaky? Even if there was a sneak attack, he had fallen from the clouds for some time. Why hadn't the expert appeared yet? Yi Fan frowned. He could not figure it out. He looked up at the sky and then looked around. With this look, he saw a person. A few miles away, an elderly lama wearing a red monk robe and a yellow cotton hat stepped on the snow and walked toward him with large strides. The old lama had a dark complexion and kind eyes. He looked like he had been through a lot. The wrinkles on his face were like stone carvings. The bone-piercing cold wind blew his crimson monk robe into the air, causing it to flutter loudly. Yi Fan stood up and looked at the old lama. He carefully observed the old Lama who was walking toward him. Anyone would find it strange that an old Lama was walking on the snow-covered ground in the middle of the night on a snowy mountain. Although his power was sealed, he could still circulate the spiritual energy in his body. His 5 senses and eyesight were not affected. After some investigation, Yi Fan found that there was nothing strange about this old Lama other than his sturdy body. He did not even have a trace of spiritual energy. Even so, Yi Fan did not dare to let down his guard. The old eunuch beside the crown prince looked like an ordinary person. However, he was not careless when he made a move. He made a hand seal and a dozen officials died in an instant. This was an eye-opener for Yi Fan. He gathered the power of the fire dragon spirit pearl in his left hand and the power of the ice core in his right. He put his hands behind his back, ready to attack at any time. He looked at the old Lama again. His robe was fluttering as he hurried over. When he encountered a steep slope, he would sit on the snow and slide down. When he encountered an uphill slope, he would use his hands and feet to climb up. Soon, the old Lama was less than 30 meters away from Yi Fan. Chapter 590. After hearing the old Lama's words, Yi Fan frowned. This monk knew that he had fallen from the clouds? The cloud riding technique had failed, the sky demon's power had been sealed, and the evil energy had been suppressed. Could it be that all of this was the doing of this monk? How should I address you, great master, and how did you know that I fell from the sky? Yi Fan narrowed his eyes and asked the red-clothed Lama who was slowly walking in front of him. This old monk, Sangjie, is the abbot of Kaba Temple. I have come on the orders of Dharmaraja to welcome you. The old Lama put his palms together and lowered his head as he spoke to Yi Fan. Dharmaraja. Yi Fan frowned after hearing this. What Dharmaraja? Why is he looking for me? Is Mr. Eldritch the one who fought against the 6 immortals 300 years ago? The old Lama asked. How do you know? Yi Fan asked in shock. The old Lama's words made him secretly shocked. Golden Rock Dharmaraja came to our Kaba temple 3 days ago and personally ordered this old monk to welcome Mr. Eldritch here today. The old Lama put his palms together and bowed to Yi Fan as he answered. Golden Rock Dharmaraja? Yi Fan asked in return. This was the first time he had heard of this name. Golden Rock Dharmaraja is the Vedanta with the highest Buddhist cultivation in Tibet. He is also a reincarnated living Buddha. The old Lama explained to Yi Fan. Why is he looking for me? Yi Fan continued to ask. This old monk does not know. The old Lama replied. Dharmaraja only ordered this old monk to come here today to welcome you and settle you in our Kaba temple. Yi Fan slowly nodded. It seemed that the Golden Rock Dharmaraja mentioned by the old Lama was acquainted with his previous life's Eldritch. Otherwise, he would not have sent a monk here to welcome him. Since that is the case, may I ask, Yi Fan cupped his hands and bowed to the old Lama as he asked, just now, I was hurrying through the clouds. Why did I suddenly lose the ability to rise and fall from the clouds? Not only that, but my spiritual energy cultivation was also suppressed. Why is that? Could it be due to Great Master's magic? Or was it caused by the Dharmaraja's divine ability? Since this Golden Rock Phuang was the living Buddha with the highest cultivation in the land of Zongdi, his skills must have reached a certain level and his mana must be boundless. To be able to suppress his sky demon power and unseal the evil chi, it should be this Golden Rock Phuang. The old Lama was stunned at first, then he smiled, revealing his neat, white teeth. This old monk's cultivation is shallow. How could I possibly suppress Mr.'s cultivation? The old Lama chuckled. As for the Dharmaraja, that's even more impossible. Since he sent me here to welcome you, why would he disperse your auspicious clouds and suppress your spirit chi cultivation? Why is that? Yi Fan looked at the old Lama's smiling face and knew that the old Lama must know the reason. Mister, you may not know, but this temple enshrines the Buddha's true body Sarira. It is protected by the true spirit and surrounded by saints. Not to mention Mister's auspicious clouds, even if a true immortal's holy spirit comes here, they would have to withdraw their divine ability and pay their respects. You must know that seeing the Sarira is like seeing the Buddha in person. They cannot blaspheme it. The old Lama explained to Yi Fan. Buddha's Sarira? Yi Fan was shocked at first, then he came to a realization. Back then, Brother Kim had been suppressed by the great Buddha's head-dazed mantra, known as the king of mantras in the Buddha world, in that mystical sandalwood box. If Brother Kim's cultivation was already like that, then there was no need to talk about him. Moreover, this time it was the Buddha's true body Sarira. His auspicious clouds had dissipated, so falling from the clouds was natural. But why was his spiritual chi cultivation being suppressed? Why did he have such a splitting headache and unbearable pain? Could it be that all the immortals passing by here had their immortal power suppressed? Why did they have to endure such pain? The Buddha was merciful and compassionate, so this was definitely not the case. Thinking of this, Yi Fan told the old Lama his doubts. The old Lama laughed heartily. "Why are you laughing, master?" Yi Fan asked in confusion. "Mister, you're really muddle-headed," the old Lama said with a smile. "Mister, you're now the king of the devil world and possess the power of the heavenly demon. You should know very well what will happen when this evil aura comes into contact with the Buddha's Sarira surrounded by saints." Yi Fan secretly scolded himself for being muddle-headed. The power of the heavenly demon was boundless. Nothing could resist it, except for Buddha. It was said that when Shakyamuni attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, the Devil Palace was shaken. The Devil King Bo Soon personally led the army of the Devil World to stop the Buddha's enlightenment. However, the Devil King used all his divine abilities and was easily neutralized by the Buddha. Even the Devil King was like this, let alone the King of the Devil World. Now, he finally understood the cause and effect of this matter. No matter how powerful the power of the Sky Demon and the unsealing evil chi were, they were still dark forces. Naturally, they were completely suppressed in front of the Buddha's real body Sarira. It was disrespectful to fly over the Buddha's real body Sarira by riding a cloud. Naturally, the cloud would disperse and slowly fall to the ground from the clouds. However, the two spiritual chis in the body's sea of chi were the most masculine yang and the most feminine yin. They were immortal powers, not dark forces. Therefore, they could move freely, but they could not be used. The fire snake dragon pearl and the ice snake inner core were animals' natal spiritual pearls, which were condensed from flesh and blood. Therefore, they were not affected. Junior didn't know the Buddha's Sarira was here. If my words offended you, please forgive me. Yi Fan cupped his hands and bowed to the old Lama. Don't blame me for not knowing. Mister, you don't have to take it to heart. The old Lama put his palms together and returned the gesture. Disciple dares not accept the responsibility of troubling Grandmaster to welcome me. Yi Fan said. Mr. Eldritch is too polite. The old Lama said to Yi Fan, Mister, please follow me back to the temple and rest while waiting for the Dharmaraja's arrival. Then I'll have to trouble Grandmaster. Yi Fan put his palms together and said respectfully, Mr. Eldritch, please follow me. The old Lama said as he extended his hand. Grandmaster, please. Yi Fan also extended his hand. The old Lama smiled and turned to walk towards the temple on the mountain peak. Yi Fan stepped forward and walked side by side with the old Lama. Although they were walking side by side, Yi Fan maintained half a step behind the old Lama to show his respect. The old Lama smiled and walked against the wind. Yi Fan looked forward respectfully. Under the glittering starry sky, a monk and a layman, one old and one young, walked on the snow with their clothes fluttering in the wind. Ever since Yi Fan had obtained his cultivation, he had rarely walked on the roads, let alone the snowy ground. Now that he was walking, he found it very refreshing. the biting cold wind, the bone-chilling air, the thick snow, and the vast snowy mountain. The feeling of stepping on solid ground made him feel very secure. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. The old Lama strode forward and began to recite the 6-syllable mantra as he fiddled with the Buddhist beads in his hand. Although his voice was very low, it was incomparably vigorous. Every word was clear and filled with power. The old Lama recited the mantra with a solemn expression. Yi Fan listened attentively and felt as if he was bathing in the spring breeze. It was unknown whether it was because of the environment, the suppression of his evil aura by the Buddhist power, or the effect of the old Lama's 6-syllable mantra, but at this moment, Yi Fan felt refreshed as he walked in this vast expanse of white heaven and earth. His ears were sharp and his eyes were clear. The 36,000 pores on his body were all free and unrestrained. After the old Lama stopped reciting the mantra, Yi Fan said from the bottom of his heart, "Great Master's incantation is really pleasant to hear." The old Lama turned around and smiled at Yi Fan. "It's not that this old monk recited it well, but that Sir has the root of wisdom. Great Master must be joking." Yi Fan blushed with shame. "I've already entered the demonic path and become the ruler of the demonic world. If you say I have the demonic root, I might believe it, but if you say I have the root of wisdom, it's simply impossible." "Has Sir Eldritch ever heard of the Demon King?" the old Lama asked Yi Fan. "I know a little," Yi Fan replied. "Tell me about it." The old Lama smiled. "I heard that when Buddha attained Tao under the Bodhi tree, the Demon King once went to disturb Buddha. In the end, Buddha repelled them one by one." Yi Fan replied. "Is there anything else?" the old Lama asked. Yi Fan shook his head. "Do you know the past, present, and future of the Demon King?" the old Lama asked. Yi Fan shook his head again. "The Demon King of the Demon Palace has many names. Bo Sun, Demon Bo Sun, Demon Luo, Son of Heaven Demon, and Lord of Freedom are all his names. Now, he's also known as Tenmoni." The old Lama told Yi Fan. He became the 6th Lord of the Desire Realm because of the merit and good karma he received from offering to Prachi Buddha in the past. He specializes in tempting people, cutting off their good roots, and obstructing righteousness. This demon's demonic power is extremely great. According to the miscellaneous Agama Sutra, for example, among the divine powers of the Desire Realm, Heavenly Demon Bo Sun is number 1. From this, one can see how strong this demon's divine power is. However, Buddha once prophesied that after this demon's blessings run out, he would fall into the great Avicii hell and suffer endless suffering. Only when he suffers endless suffering in hell would he remember Buddha's teachings and cultivate diligently. Finally, he would leave the Avicii hell and be born in the 33 heavens. As the old Lama spoke, he looked at Yi Fan. Yi Fan frowned and didn't say a word. He didn't expect the Demon King, Tenmoni, to have such a background. He also didn't expect him to fall into the Avicii hell in the future. No wonder Qing Chenzi didn't tell him about the heavenly demon's power back then. Now that he was the Demon King, he wondered if he would fall into the great Avicii hell like Tenmoni in the future. The old Lama looked at Yi Fan's expression and turned his head with a smile. "It seems like Sir understands this old monk's words. Since Great Master knows that I'm the Demon King, I'm sure Great Master also knows that I have my difficulties," Yi Fan said to the old Lama. The old Lama turned his head and calmly asked Yi Fan, "Which person in the world doesn't have difficulties?" Yi Fan was left speechless by the old Lama's sudden rebuke. Yi Fan didn't know how to answer. If all the people in the world with difficulties fell into the demonic path like Sir, then wouldn't this world become the demon world? The old Lama asked again. Yi Fan couldn't say a single word after being questioned. "After you use the heavenly demon's power to break the 9 cauldrons barrier, aren't you afraid that when the karma matures, you will fall into the Avicii hell like Tenmoni?" The old llama pressed on. Yi Fan was sweating profusely and didn't know how to answer. At this moment, he seemed to have been forced into a dead end with nowhere to escape. How is it? Has this old monk stumped, sir? The old llama asked Yi Fan with a smile. Great Master's words are as sharp as a knife and as sharp as a sword. Junior is trembling with fear and unease, Yi Fan said to the old llama as he wiped his sweat. Ha ha ha! The old llama laughed loudly. The sea of bitterness is boundless, turn back and see the shore. It's not too late to mend the pen after the sheep have been lost. Yi Fan was silent. He understood the old llama's meaning. The old llama wanted him to give up the heavenly demon's power and return to the righteous path. Junior understands Great Master's meaning, but Junior has no choice right now, Yi Fan said to the old llama with a frown. In other words, he still couldn't give up the heavenly demon's power. If you use your appearance to see me and voice to beg me, then you are walking the evil path and can't see Tathagata. Sigh. The old Lama sighed deeply and recited a gatha from the Diamond Sutra. Yi Fan was silent and the old Lama didn't say anything else. Chapter 591. He didn't even need to think to know that this monastery was the Kaaba monastery that the old Lama had mentioned. Creak. The old Lama pushed open the door and walked in. Yi Fan patted the snowflakes off his body and followed the old Lama into the monastery. The Kaaba monastery wasn't very big and took up about 10 mu. Inside the courtyard, there were dozens of huge copper prayer wheels neatly lined up on both sides. They were surrounded by countless prayer flags and appeared especially solemn. Inside the numerous halls, there were Buddha statues that were completely different from those of the Han dynasty. Countless butter lamps illuminated the halls with golden light. It's late at night and the monks are all asleep. This old monk will first bring Mr. to the guest room to rest, the old Lama said to Yi Fan as he turned around and closed the door. Thank you for your trouble, great master. Yi Fan observed the environment of the monastery and said, Mister, please follow me. The old Lama said to Yi Fan as he walked toward a room at the back of the monastery. Yi Fan followed closely behind. After a while, the old Lama brought Yi Fan to a Tibetan room. This is the bedroom prepared for Mr. The old Lama stopped and turned to Yi Fan. This place is remote and the conditions can't be compared to those large monasteries in the Han dynasty. I can only trouble Mr. Great Master is too polite. This is already very good, Yi Fan said to the old Lama. The room has already prepared hot water, tamba, and some cooked butter tea for Mr. If Mr. needs anything else, you can find me in the side hall. The old Lama said. I don't dare to trouble Great Master. This is enough, Yi Fan respectfully said to the old Lama. Since that's the case, this old monk won't disturb Mr.'s rest. The old Lama clasped his hands and said to Yi Fan, Great Master, please. Yi Fan clasped his hands together and returned the greeting. The old Lama turned around and left. After Yi Fan watched the old Lama leave, he gently pushed open the door and entered the bedroom. As soon as he pushed the door open, a gust of warm air greeted him. The bright oil lamp, the warm brazier, the exquisite thenka, the low wooden table, all the furnishings were filled with a strong Tibetan style. Yi Fan warmed himself up by the fire, rubbed his hands, and slowly walked to the wooden table. He pulled out a wooden chair and sat down. On the wooden table, there was a medium-sized Tibetan food box. It looked quite exquisite. He reached out to open the food box, and a burst of fragrance wafted out from inside. The food in the food box was very simple. There was a large box of tsamba, a pot of butter tea, and 2 medium-sized Tibetan porcelain bowls. Xiao Zhao, come and eat. Yi Fan took out a few pieces of tsamba from the food box and placed them in a porcelain bowl. Then, he placed them in front of Baihu, who was shaking her head and wagging her tail while drooling. Baihu didn't even smell it. She dived into the bowl and began to eat heartily. She was born in the snowy mountains of Tibet, so naturally, she had a special fondness for the food of her hometown. Ever since she was rescued by Eldritch and brought back to the Lingyun cave, she had never tasted the flavor of her hometown again. "Eat slowly, no one is fighting with you," Yi Fan said with a smile as he stroked Baihu, who was wolfing down the food. He took out a few pieces of tsamba from the food box and placed them in Baihu's bowl. Then, he picked up the iron pot in the food box and poured out 2 cups of steaming hot butter tea. He placed 1 cup in front of Baihu. After doing all this, Yi Fan pinched a piece of tsamba and placed it in his mouth. Then, he carried the steaming hot butter tea to the brazier. Although it was already late at night, he was not in the mood to sleep. What was the relationship between that golden rock Phuang and his previous life's Eldritch? Why did he ask the old Lama to settle him in this Kaaba temple? To help him? To trap him? Also, where was the divine cauldron that the crown prince spoke of? How did he know that there was a cauldron in Tibet? Countless questions appeared in his mind, causing his mind to be in a mess. Who cares, since he was already here? He might as well make the best of it. The only thing he could do now was wait. Wait for that golden rock Phuang to appear. As long as he appeared, all the questions would become clear and clear. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yi Fan pushed the brazier to the side of the bed, and then lay down on the bed with his clothes still on. Baihu leaped onto the bed and snuggled up to Yi Fan, sleeping peacefully with its fluffy fox tail as its pillow. It had already formed a habit of not being able to sleep without being next to Yi Fan. In other words, it did not feel safe at all. After running for a long distance and trekking through the snow, the man and the fox quickly fell asleep. Buzz. Not long after Yi Fan fell asleep, a resplendent golden pillar of light descended from the ceiling. It was as if a light barrier had appeared in the bedroom. Yi Fan opened his eyes and abruptly sat up on the bed. The golden pillar of light before him was dazzling and dazzling. There were tens of thousands of rays of light and thousands of strands of auspicious air. Amidst the golden light, a kind-looking old man in yellow slowly appeared. The old man had white eyebrows and a long beard. He smiled at Yi Fan, who quickly sat up from the bed. "Mr. Eldritch, we meet again," the old man said as he dispersed the golden light around him. "This great master must be the golden rock Phuang that Master Sangjie was talking about," Yi Fan asked the old man. "There is no fixed law, and fixed law is illegal," the old man said to Yi Fan with a smile. "It's just a name, no different from dust. It's not worth mentioning." "Junior greets the great master," Yi Fan said as he knelt on the ground and respectfully kowtowed to the old man. This person spoke words of wisdom and the truth of Buddhism, so he was undoubtedly a living Buddha. "All appearances are illusory. Mister, you don't have to adhere to worldly etiquette. Please rise, please rise." The old man reached out and helped Yi Fan up from the ground. Yi Fan stood up and looked at the old man. "The last time I discussed Zen with you, I was only a young acolyte who had just become a monk. Now that we meet again, you and I have already reincarnated. It's true that things have remained the same, but people have changed." The old man looked at Yi Fan and lamented. "Did I know you in my previous life, great master?" Yi Fan asked. The old man smiled and nodded. "So that's it." Yi Fan thought to himself. His deduction was not wrong at all. The two of them knew each other in their previous lives. "Master, may I know why you've led me here this time?" Yi Fan asked. "Of course it's for you," the old man replied. "For me?" Yi Fan furrowed his brows. "You and I had a promise in our previous lives. After we reincarnated and met again, we had to enlighten whoever had the higher realm and help them break away from their cultivation," the old man replied. "In order to fulfill this promise, I reincarnated in Tibet for 3 lifetimes, waiting for the day to meet you again. Now that the karma has matured, we finally meet again." Yi Fan was shocked when he heard this. In order to meet him, the old Dharma king had actually reincarnated 3 times in this Tibetan land. Great Master! Yi Fan was so moved by the old man's words that he could not speak. I have a piece of advice. I hope you can rein in your horse at the edge of the cliff and behave yourself, the old man said to Yi Fan. As for whether you listen or not, it all depends on your fate. Great Master, please speak, Yi Fan said with reddened eyes. Mortal and Bufan are separated by a single thought. The old man looked at Yi Fan with a calm expression and said, Mortal is mortal, Bufan is holy. Those who forget both mortal and holy are Buddhas. As the saying goes, the mortal does not decrease and the holy does not increase. To see all forms is to see Tathagata. Yi Fan seemed to understand after hearing this. Mortal Bufan. Yi Fan Bufan. There really seemed to be an inextricable connection between mortal and Bufan. But even so, Yi Fan still could not understand the profound meaning behind the old man's words. Great Master, I don't understand. Yi Fan raised his head and frowned at the old man. You are now the ruler of the demon world, and a layer of the seal has been broken. Have you ever thought about what you will become in the future? Demon? Human? Both human and demon? When the master of the demon world, Tenmoni, falls into hell in the future, who will rule the demon world? You? Do you also want to fall into eternal damnation? Qingquanzi asked you to find the 9 cauldrons not only to save your wife, but more importantly to let you accumulate great merit. But you have entered the demon path and embarked on the path of evil. In this way, what is the use of finding the 9 cauldrons? What is the use of understanding the supreme secret text? When you fall into hell, it will be too late to regret. Yi Fan was silent and did not say a word. Listen to my advice. The sea of bitterness is boundless. Turn back to the shore before it is too late, the old man said to Yi Fan. Great Master, you want me to give up everything I am doing now? Yi Fan asked with a frown. Not give up, but let go, the old man said to Yi Fan. Have you forgotten what Qingquanzi said to you that day? As long as you let go of your wife, regardless of Buddhism or Taoism, and focus on cultivation, the two of you will be safe and sound. Love, hate, affection, and enmity are illusory, and the past will be written off. Love, hate, affection, and enmity are illusory, and the past will be written off. Yi Fan repeated this sentence repeatedly with red eyes. These 14 words were like 14 steel knives that stabbed into Yi Fan's heart, making him feel so much pain that he wished he was dead. Great Master, I can't do it. Thinking of his wife's crazy appearance and Xiao Zhao's fox body after losing her inner core, Yi Fan's eyes teared up. He slowly shook his head and said firmly, Amit Ba. The old man chanted and slowly shook his head. In order to enlighten you, I have waited for more than 300 years. In the end, I came with nothing and left with nothing. After the old man finished speaking, he slowly turned around and the golden light around him shone again. Everything is like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew, like lightning. Mr. Eldritch, we will meet again if fate wills it. The old man chanted the Vajra Sutra and slowly disappeared. In the room, only the red-eyed Yi Fan and the soundly asleep Baihu were left. Great Master, Great Master. Yi Fan, who was on the bed, shouted as he sat up on the bed. The sky was bright and the sun had risen. Baihu was staring at Yi Fan with a pair of clear and transparent eyes. She looked suspiciously at the sweaty and teary-eyed Yi Fan. So it was a dream. After taking a good look at his surroundings, Yi Fan let out a long sigh. What a realistic dream. He wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes and thought in his heart. Clap, clap, clap. Clap, clap, clap. Just when he thought that a long night would lead to many dreams, there was a hurried knock on the door. Mr. Eldritch. Mr. Eldritch. It was the voice of a young lama, sounding very anxious. Yi Fan tidied up his hair and clothes, quickly walked to the door and opened it. Mr. Eldritch, Golden Rock Fuang has passed away. Our temple's abbot, Master Sangjia, has already rushed to Golden Rock Temple to send him off. Outside the door, a young lama who looked to be 17 or 18 years old said to Yifan with red eyes. Chapter 592. Dharmaraja has passed away? Yifan asked as he steadied himself. Yes. The little lama's eyes were red as he said, before the abbot left, he told me to tell you that Dharmaraja has passed away and will not see you again. You can leave now. The little lama put his palms together and bowed to Yifan, then turned around and left. Yifan froze in place, unable to believe that this was real. The dream just now was not an illusion, it was so real that it could not be any more real. This friend of his from his previous life, after failing to enlighten him, suddenly said goodbye and passed away. He waited for 3 lifetimes just to meet him, to fulfill his promise from his previous life. 2 streams of hot tears flowed out of Yifan's eyes. Xiao Zhao, let's go, Yifan said in a low voice. He bent down and picked up Baihu, then closed the door and slowly walked towards the entrance of the temple. Baihu in his arms looked at Yifan's sorrowful expression, her face full of confusion. He still hasn't seen Golden Rock Dharmaraja. Why is he so sad about Dharmaraja's death? Woo! Baihu in Yifan's arms whimpered as she raised her front paws and clawed at Yifan's chest. She looked at Yifan with heartache. I'm fine, Yifan with red eyes said as he stroked Baihu's forehead and squeezed out a smile. He came to the entrance of the temple and pushed open the door. Stepping on the thick snow, he slowly walked towards the bottom of the vast snowy mountain. The bone-chilling wind blew on his face like a knife. Yifan had a sorrowful expression as he walked against the wind and snow, not saying a word. Baihu knew that Yifan was in a bad mood, so she obediently curled up in Yifan's arms. From time to time, she would lick Yifan's hand to comfort Yifan. Usually, Yifan would be able to ignore the distance of 1.5 kilometers. However, it was a difficult task for him now. His demonic powers had been sealed, his cloud riding technique had lost its effect, and he was unable to release the spiritual energy in his sea of qi. Now, he could only walk step by step out of this vast snowy mountain. After walking for 2 hours, Yifan finally reached the mountainside of the snowy mountain. After walking out of the Buddha's relics area of influence, Yifan felt his demonic power gradually recover. The golden Buddha's power that was suppressing it also began to slowly disappear. Regaining his lost power should have been something to be happy about, but at this moment, Yifan couldn't feel happy at all. Losing an old friend from a previous life who had bitterly waited for him for 3 lifetimes, if it was anyone else, they wouldn't be happy. However, despite the pain, the search for the cauldron had to continue. After recovering his strength, Yifan used his movement skill and flew down from the mountainside to the foot of the snowy mountain. At this time, the sky was already bright, and the stone road at the foot of the mountain was already bustling with people. Among these people, there were shop assistants who got up early to do business, laborers who got up early to provide 3 meals a day for their families, craftsmen who kept clanking and hammering, and pilgrims who knelt down every 3 steps and bowed every 5 steps with a pious look on their faces. Everyone had their own destiny, and his destiny was to find the 9 cauldrons and save his wife. Walking through the bustling streets, Yifan sighed with emotion as he looked at the busy people. He walked around the streets a few times, and then settled down in an inn owned by Han people. The search for the cauldrons couldn't be rushed. He had to find the relevant clues first, and then carefully investigate. He couldn't be like a headless fly running around. After paying the money and checking into the room, Yifan called out to the waiter. "Little brother, I want to ask you something," Yifan said to the waiter. "What are you talking about, sir?" "You can ask whatever you want, as long as it is something this little one knows," the waiter politely replied. "Is there a place to store the county records in Tibet?" Yifan asked the waiter. The local county records generally recorded the local affairs and all kinds of supernatural phenomena. As long as you carefully investigate, you should be able to find the traces of the divine cauldrons. The place to store the county records? The waiter was stunned at first, and then replied, "Sir, are you asking about the document courtyard in Tibet?" "The document courtyard?" Yi Fan asked. "This document courtyard is responsible for all the local literature and history of Tibet, as well as engraved books. It is the highest official residence here. The local county records that you are talking about should be there." The waiter replied to Yi Fan, "Is the highest official in this document courtyard a Han or a Tibetan?" Yi Fan heard the waiter say so, and his eyes immediately lit up. The various official positions in this Tibetan area are generally under the joint jurisdiction of Han and Tibetan officials. The electric waiter replied, "This document courtyard involves Han and Tibetan culture, so it should be the same. This little one is just an in-waiter, and has never been to this Tibetan official's residence. Sir, please forgive me." After Yi Fan heard this, he slowly nodded. "What? Sir wants to go to the document courtyard?" the waiter asked. "Oh, I was asked by a friend to go there and engrave a few sets of Tibetan scriptures to bring back to the Han." Yi Fan lied to the waiter. "So it's like this." The waiter nodded. "Where is this document courtyard?" Yi Fan asked the waiter. "It is directly east of here. It is a bit far from here, about 300 or 400 miles away." The waiter said, "If you take a yak cart, it will take at least 3 days to go back and forth." "Thank you, little brother." Yi Fan took out a golden leaf from his bosom and handed it to the waiter. Sir, this is too much." The waiter saw Yi Fan take out a golden leaf and was a little surprised for a moment. "This is my first time in Tibet, so I am not familiar with this place. I may have to trouble little brother in the future." Yi Fan said to the waiter, "Sir, rest assured. As long as I can help you, I will do my best. I will do my best." The waiter made a small fortune and was beaming with joy. "I like peace and quiet. If there is anything, I will call you. If there is nothing, don't disturb me." Yi Fan continued, "Don't worry, this little one understands." The waiter said, "You rest first. If there is anything you need, just tell this little one." Yi Fan nodded. The waiter smiled and bowed out of the room, gently closing the door. Yi Fan poured a cup of tea and drank it while thinking about his next plan. He had already calculated that when there was no one at night, he would go to the document courtyard and check the local county records there. If he was lucky, he might be able to find the specific location of the divine cauldron. He would do that. Yi Fan drank his tea slowly. A day passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sky was getting dark and the sun was setting in the west. Bright stars filled the sky. Seeing that it was getting late, Yi Fan put Baihu, who had been sleeping all day, on his shoulder. Then he used the ghostly body movement skill and turned into a ray of light. He rushed out of the window and went straight into the clouds. He stepped on the auspicious clouds and focused his eyesight. He looked at the ground carefully while flying slowly. Soon, a slightly tall building appeared in his sight. This building was more than 3 stories high. It was half Han and half Tibetan. There were 2 soldiers guarding the door. There was no need to guess that this was the Scrivener courtyard that the waiter had mentioned. Seeing that he had found the document courtyard, Yi Fan used his body movement skill and left the auspicious clouds. He disappeared into thin air. Buzz, with a flash of green light, Yi Fan, who was wearing a black robe and had silver hair, walked out of the green light slowly. He was squatting on Baihu's shoulder. Around him, tall bookshelves were arranged neatly around him. On the bookshelves there were all kinds of books. The air was filled with the fragrance of ink. He was now on the 3rd floor of the document courtyard. At this time, there was no one in the courtyard. Although this was the highest office in the Tibetan area, it was full of all kinds of books. There were no valuable items. Therefore, there was no one on duty. Yi Fan walked slowly to the front of the bookshelves. He reached out and pulled out a few books. He flipped through them casually. Yi Fan's heart skipped a beat when he saw the book. The words in the books were all in Tibetan. He didn't know a single word. He was so muddle-headed that he even forgot about this. What should he do? Yi Fan frowned and put the books back to their original place. After thinking for a moment, Yi Fan suddenly had a bold idea. Since he didn't know the Tibetan language, he would simply find the official in charge of this place and let him find it. Anyway, he had the jade pendant that the crown prince gave him. Now was the time to use it. The old eunuch had said that seeing the jade pendant was like seeing the crown prince. A mere local official would definitely not dare to disobey the order. Thinking of this, Yi Fan walked down the stairs and slowly walked out of the stone building. The two soldiers guarding the door were leaning against the stone wall and yawning. Suddenly, they saw a black robe and silver hair man slowly coming out of the door of the courtyard. He looked at the two of them with a strange smile. Yi Fan's appearance made the two soldiers' hair stand on end. They were scared out of their wits and screamed, "Ah!" They threw down the weapons in their hands, threw away their helmets and armor, and screamed for their lives. In the middle of the night, a man with silver hair slowly came out of the closed door. Anyone would be scared out of their wits. Looking at the two soldiers running for their lives, Yi Fan, who came out of the door, smiled. It wouldn't be long before the highest official here appeared. What he needed to do now was to wait here. Sure enough, in less than the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, a group of people on horses came from afar. Walking at the front were the two guards who were scared out of their wits. Behind him were two officials, one Tibetan and one Chinese. More than 10 tall soldiers with hidden swords at their waists followed in formation. What made Yi Fan not know whether to laugh or cry was that there was a tall red-clothed Lama with half his arm exposed. It seemed that they really thought he was a ghost. Yi Fan thought to himself. When they saw the black-robed and silver-haired Yi Fan standing at the door of the document courtyard, the two soldiers immediately pointed at Yi Fan and reported to the two officials in Tibetan. The two officials were also stunned when they saw Yi Fan. The two of them looked at the tall red-clothed Lama behind them. The red-clothed Lama frowned and looked at Yi Fan. Then, he said a few words to the two officials in Tibetan. The general meaning was that this was a person, not a ghost. "Who are you? You actually used sorcery to barge into the document courtyard?" The official in Han official's robes asked Yi Fan sternly. He saw that Yi Fan's black robe was not Tibetan, so he asked in Chinese. Yi Fan did not answer. He took out the jade pendant the crown prince gave him, and threw it to the official in Han official's robes. The official in Han official's robes caught it and looked at the item in his hand suspiciously. Chapter 593. Long live your highness the crown prince. After seeing the jade pendant, the official in Han clothing immediately pulled the puzzled Tibetan official to kneel on the ground, holding the jade pendant with both hands and saying "Long live." Voila! Seeing the two officials kneel, the dozen soldiers behind them also knelt down and saluted Yi Fan. "What is your name? What is your position?" Yi Fan said as he slowly walked in front of the official in Han clothing. He reached out to take the jade pendant and put it in his pocket. "I am Su Song, the supervisor of this Scrivener courtyard." The official in Han clothing respectfully replied. "Stand up and speak," Yi Fan said. "Yes." The official in Han clothing stood up and stood with his hands by his side. "I am here on the orders of the Crown Prince to do a secret mission. Tell them to withdraw, I have something important for you to do." Yi Fan said to the official in Han clothing, "Remember, you are not allowed to reveal my arrival to anyone. Those who disobey will be beheaded." "Yes." The official in Han clothing saluted Yi Fan, then turned around and said a few words to the crowd in Tibetan. Everyone's expression changed slightly. After bowing to Yi Fan, the soldiers followed the Tibetan officials and retreated respectfully. They disappeared into the vast night. At the entrance of the Scrivener courtyard, only Yi Fan and the official in Han clothing named Su Song were left. Does this Scrivener courtyard have all the county records of Tibet? After everyone left, Yi Fan asked Su Song. Replying to Darren, in this Scrivener courtyard, except for this year's county records, the rest are all sealed in the Scrivener courtyard's library. Su Song respectfully replied. Yi Fan nodded and said, help me do one thing now. Compile all the myths and legends of Tibet into a book and give it to me in 3 days. All the myths and legends of Tibet? Mystical things? Su Song frowned. What? Is there a problem? Yi Fan asked when he saw Su Song's troubled expression. Sir, please allow me to report, Su Song said respectfully to Yi Fan. Most of the Tibetans in the Tibetan area believe in religion. There are many myths and legends and countless miraculous things. Even if I don't eat or sleep for 3 days, it's impossible for me to organize all the miraculous things into a book. I only want the outline of the incident. I don't need the details, Yi Fan said to Su Song. You only need a few strokes. If I have any questions after reading it, I will come and talk to you in detail. If that's the case, this official will only need 1 day to complete it, Su Song said to Yi Fan. That's great, Yi Fan nodded and said, I'll wait for you here tomorrow night. Give me the scroll. Yes, sir, Su Song replied. Remember, you can't let anyone else know about this. Do you understand? Yi Fan reminded Su Song. This official understands, Su Song cupped his hands and replied. Good, Yi Fan nodded slowly. You go and take care of this matter. Yes, sir, Su Song bowed to Yi Fan. This official will take his leave. After speaking, Su Song bowed and left. Yi Fan stood there for a long time, then used his movement technique to return to the inn. Time quickly passed, and it was the night of the 2nd day. After Yi Fan and Baihu had eaten at the inn, they stepped on the auspicious clouds and once again arrived in the sky above the document courtyard. At this time, the official called Su Song was wearing casual clothes and waiting at the entrance of the document courtyard. He was holding a thick book in his hand. Shwa. Yi Fan dispersed the auspicious clouds and used his strange movement technique, instantly disappearing into thin air. You've come. Su Song, who was holding the book, was looking into the distance when Yi Fan's voice suddenly came from behind him. He was startled by this voice and instinctively turned around. Sir! Sir! Yi Fan's sudden appearance and disappearance shocked him. How long have you been waiting? Yi Fan asked. This official has just arrived. Su Song tried to make his voice as calm as possible. This young man's clothes were strange and his whereabouts were erratic. He was elusive and mysterious. He was definitely not an official of the imperial court. But even so, he did not dare to have any doubts. The jade pendant in this person's hand was indeed the personal jade pendant of the current imperial court's crown prince. Currently, the crown prince was in charge of the imperial court. He was in charge of military affairs and exercised the power of the country. No one dared to disobey his orders. To be able to obtain the crown prince's jade pendant, this person's relationship with him must be very close. Su Song thought in his heart. Have you prepared the things I asked for? Yi Fan calmly asked Su Song. Sir, it has been prepared. Su Song said and handed the book in his hands to Yi Fan. This official has compiled the miracles and strange things in the entire Tibetan area into a book. Please check it, sir. Yi Fan took it with one hand and casually flipped through it. He saw that inside the book, it was densely filled with small characters. The handwriting was delicate and neat, and the classification was clear. Time, place, occurrence, outline of myths and legends, the beginning and end of the miracles and strange things, everything was there. Thank you for your hard work. Yi Fan looked at the book in his hand and said to Su Song. Sir is too polite. Su Song replied. This matter ends here. I have not been here, understand? Yi Fan closed the book in his hand and raised an eyebrow at Su Song. This official understands. Su Song cupped his hands and replied, This official has not seen Sir. Yi Fan nodded and said, I still have something to do. I will leave first. Farewell, sir. Su Song cupped his hands and bowed deeply to Yi Fan. When he straightened up, Yi Fan was already nowhere to be seen. He is truly an expert. Su Song sighed from the bottom of his heart. After returning to the inn, Yi Fan brewed a large pot of strong tea, then placed the book on the table, and carefully flipped through it. Bai Hu obediently lay on the table, and quietly accompanied Yi Fan. A man, a fox, and a lamp. At this moment, the scene was like a scene from a supernatural novel. Yi Fan flipped through the book page by page, not missing any clues. Su Song was right. There were many myths and legends in Tibet, and there was an endless stream of mystical things. There were stories of the divine lake, legends of the living Buddha, snow mountain monsters, and mountain gods. There were too many to mention. Yi Fan read for an entire night before he finished reading the entire book. He was completely unaware that the lamp had run out of oil, the charcoal had been extinguished, and Bai Hu was sleeping soundly. He still gained something from this night's hard work. He found a few places where the divine cauldron might be hidden. Namso, one of the divine lakes in Tibet. This lake was like the blue sky falling to the ground. Hence, it was known as the Heavenly Lake. There were many mystical things happening in this lake. According to the records, more than one person had seen a huge fish more than 10 feet long swimming on the surface of the lake. There were also people who had heard a loud bang coming from the lake and a pillar of water soaring into the sky. Thinking about the divine cauldron in the Heavenly Lake, Yi Fan vaguely felt that the divine cauldron might be located in this divine lake. The second place was a piece of divine stone that was worshipped by the local people. This piece of divine stone was extremely huge, more than 10 feet tall. It was fiery red like a small red mountain, standing at the peak of a snow mountain. No one knew when this piece of divine stone appeared. They only knew that it had existed for at least 1,000 years. According to the records, this piece of divine stone was extremely mystical. It would not be touched by rain, and Feishua would not fall. No one could get close to it within a radius of 10 feet. This phenomenon made Yi Fan think of the powerful barrier surrounding the divine cauldron. The third place that made Yi Fan suspicious was the highest peak in the snowy region, the highest peak in the Himalayas, Mount Komalangma. In Tibetan mythology, Mount Komalangma was considered the third of the 5 fairies. It was known as the Supreme Mountain, the divine mountain that eagles could not fly over. According to the records, someone had seen an immortal appear on the divine mountain and fly up into the sky. In Yi Fan's opinion, it might not be an immortal, but a cultivation expert looking for the divine cauldron. These 3 places were the most likely places, and they were also Yi Fan's main targets of investigation. There were still a few other suspicious places, but the possibility was not very high. The plan now was to start from these 3 places and investigate them one by one. Thinking of this, Yi Fan slowly closed the thick book. At this time, it was already early in the morning. The cold air and the clues that he had just obtained made him unable to sleep. He took some charcoal from the corner of the wall and placed it in the brazier. He urged the fire snake dragon ball in his body to ignite it. Then, he picked up Bai Hu, who was sleeping on the table, and placed her on the bed, covering her with a blanket. Xiao Zhao had stayed up with him for most of the night and was sleeping soundly at this time. After Yi Fan covered Bai Hu, he opened the door and went downstairs to instruct the waiter to prepare 2 big bowls of lamb bone soup and 5 jeans of cooked beef. He stayed up all night without sleep, and his stomach was already rumbling with hunger. In addition, this was Tibet, the air was thin and the climate was cold. He needed some high-temperature food to maintain his strength. When the waiter heard the God of Fortune's request, he immediately ordered the kitchen to prepare it immediately. In a short while, 2 big bowls of steaming lamb bone soup and fragrant cooked beef were ready. "Sir, I will send it to your room," the waiter said to Yi Fan as he deftly put the food into the food box. "No need, I can bring it up myself." Yi Fan took the food box and said, I will be staying here for a few days. You prepare 2 big bowls of lamb bone soup and cooked beef every night. I will come and get it myself. Yes, sir. The waiter nodded. Okay. Yi Fan carried the food box and slowly walked upstairs. For him, it was not suitable to go out during the day to search for the cauldron. This was the Tibetan area, and almost everyone believed in Buddhism. The 3 places where the sacred cauldron could be hidden would have many pilgrims during the day. Only at night was the best time for him to search for the cauldron. Waiter, give me a bowl of lamb soup and 2 jeans of cooked beef. At the same time Yi Fan was walking up the stairs, a burly man who spoke stiff Chinese walked in from outside the door. As he spoke, he raised his head and looked at Yi Fan, who was walking up the stairs slowly with a food box in his hand. This man had a ferocious face. He was wearing a brown Tibetan robe. He was tall and strong, like an iron tower. The waiter was stunned. Generally, most of the people who came to their shop were Han people. They did business with Han people. Those Tibetans almost never came to stay here, let alone eat. I am talking to you, Han dog, do you hear me? Pa. The burly Tibetan said and slammed his palm on the counter. A huge palm print more than an inch deep immediately appeared on the counter. From the beginning to the end, this person's eyes never left Yi Fan. Yi Fan stopped in his tracks when he heard Han Go's name. He turned his head and looked at the Tibetan with a blank expression. The Tibetan sneered and looked at Yi Fan with disdain. Please wait a moment, it will be ready soon. The waiter was scared by the strength of the burly man's palm. He stammered and staggered into the kitchen. It was better to avoid trouble. They could not afford to provoke this kind of person. Yi Fan turned his head and slowly went upstairs. He was here to search for the cauldron, so he had to keep a low profile. After all, he was not the only one looking for the cauldron. It was easier to teach this person a lesson than to kill an ant. But in that way, he was likely to attract the attention of others. He was lucky today. Chapter 594. A day passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, it was already night-time. The lanterns were lit, and Mingyu hung high in the sky. Yi Fan blew out the candles and placed Baihu, who had been recuperating all day, on his shoulder. Using his movement technique, he turned into a green light and flew out of the window, straight into the clouds. Lake Namu Kyo was the closest to here, about 300 miles away. He wanted to go there first to check it out. If he was lucky, he might be able to find the divine cauldron tonight and obtain the patterns on the cauldron. Yi Fan, who was on top of the auspicious clouds, thought to himself. The auspicious clouds were as fast as lightning, and the 300 miles were covered in the blink of an eye. Yi Fan soon arrived above Lake Namu Kyo. He stopped the auspicious clouds and looked down from the cloud. Beneath his feet there was a wide lake, like a huge blue gem embedded in the ground. Under the illumination of the starlight, the surface of the lake flickered with specks of brilliance, as if it was a paradise. This Lake Namu Kyo was worthy of being called a heavenly lake. It was indeed magnificent and magnificent. However, Yi Fan was not in the mood to appreciate this rare beauty. Seeing that there was no one around the lake, he immediately dispersed the auspicious clouds under his feet and floated down from the sky like a leaf. Buzz! The water-repelling pearl shone again, and a huge transparent light shield covered Yi Fan and Baihu, who was lying on his shoulder. Splash! With a burst of snow-white water, Yi Fan's figure rushed into the lake. This divine lake was not as deep as Yi Fan imagined. The deepest part was only 100 feet. With the experience of finding the cauldron at Sisui River, Yi Fan skillfully activated the water-repelling pearl and quickly reached the bottom of the lake. The lake water was clear and translucent under the moonlight, and the line of sight was excellent. Yi Fan kept the water-repelling pearl 3 feet away from the bottom of the lake, and used his spiritual power to activate the pearl, quickly moving toward the center of the lake. While moving forward at high speed, he used all the senses in his body to carefully sense all the movements around him. Baihu lay on Yifan's shoulder, looking curiously at the school of fish that constantly shuttled past them. Although it grew up in the Tibetan area, its range of activity was very small. It had never come to the Namso Lake in the hearts of the Tibetans, let alone enter the lake. Under Yifan's control, the water-repelling light ball was extremely fast. In less than half an incense stick's worth of time, it had already reached the center of the divine lake. This was the deepest place in the entire divine lake, and also the place where the divine cauldron was most likely to be hidden. Yifan slowed down the speed of the waterproof light ball and focused his mind, fully sensing the movements here. Whoosh! A huge black shadow flashed past several hundred feet in front of him, stirring up waves of turbulence. Woo! Baihu, who was on Yifan's shoulder, was startled by this scene. She whimpered and curled up her body. "Don't worry, it's just a big fish." Yifan patted Baihu on his shoulder and comforted her. "Fish? There was such a big fish?" Upon hearing Yifan's words, Baihu turned to look at Yifan with a shocked expression. In her memory, the largest fish was only a foot long. But that black shadow just now was at least over 100 feet long. "Silly girl, there are many fish bigger than this." Yifan chuckled when he saw Baihu's shocked expression. He had been in the East Sea for a period of time, and he had seen all kinds of big fish. One of them was called a whale. Its body was so large that it was even larger than the Matsumoto Takayoshi's battleship. However, Yifan's keen eyesight had seen all of this. Baihu didn't like seawater, and her eyesight was ordinary. Furthermore, she spent most of her time in the cabin of the ship, so it was normal that she hadn't seen any big fish. Baihu blinked with an incredulous expression. Yifan smiled and continued to urge the ball of light to move forward in the Lake of Divinity, hundreds of kilometers away. A Tibetan blade made of fine steel gently extended through the gap in the door of Yifan's room. Then, it flicked upward. Crack! The crossbar of the door was suddenly pushed aside. Creak! The door was pushed open from the outside, and a burly man flashed in from outside. He turned around and closed the door again. This person was dressed in black, and his body was like an iron tower. There was a fierce glint in his eyes. It was none other than the burly Tibetan man who had come to the inn in the morning. Taking advantage of the moonlight, he quickly walked to Yifan's bed and quickly searched around. However, there was nothing on the bed except for the bedding. The Tibetan man came to the wooden table and continued to search. When he saw the thick ancient book on the wooden table, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he picked it up to flip through it. After seeing Yifan use a brush to make a few marks on the ancient book, the Tibetan man's eyes immediately lit up with excitement. When Yifan returned to the sky above the inn, it was already 6 hours later, and the sky was gradually brightening. After almost an entire night of searching in the Lake of Divinity, he did not find anything strange except for a few slightly mature big fish. Although he had mentally prepared himself for the fact that there was no divine cauldron in the Lake of Divinity, he still could not help but feel a little disappointed. He turned into a green light and returned to the room. He poured a large bowl of water for Baihu to drink. Then, he laid down heavily on the bed, his hands on the pillow and his brows tightly knitted. There was no divine cauldron in the Lake of Divinity, and the only suspicious places left were the Divine Stone and Mount Everest. He was worried that if there was no divine cauldron in these two places, what should he do? From what the Crown Prince had said to him, the Crown Prince did not know the exact location of the divine cauldron. He only knew that the divine cauldron was in the Tibetan area. Otherwise, it was impossible for him not to tell him. "Forget it, I won't think too much about it. I'll finish searching the remaining two places first." Yifan, who was lying on the bed, thought that perhaps the next place would be the location of the divine cauldron. Thinking of this, Yifan sat up from the bed. "Xiao Zhao, don't drink water. "Brother, Yi will make you some mutton bone soup to warm your body," Yi Fan said to Baihu as he stood up. The mutton bone soup made by the inn's chef was very good. It tasted delicious and did not have any rank odor. The fragrance of the bones filled the air, and the meat was fat and tender, causing Yi Fan to greatly praise it. Last time, he brought back 2 bowls of mutton bone soup, and one of them was for Xiao Zhao to drink. Ever since Yi Fan opened the door to meet for Xiao Zhao, she did not refuse any of the food that Yi Fan gave her, whether it was meat or vegetables. Hearing that Yi Fan was going to get the mutton bone soup, Baihu stopped drinking water and licked her lip. She was the same as Yi Fan. She liked the mutton bone soup very much. Yi Fan smiled. He walked to the door, reached out to open it, and walked out. However, the moment he opened the door, Yi Fan's expression changed and he stopped in his tracks. The door had been opened. Yi Fan was secretly shocked. He remembered very clearly that he had personally fixed the door and had never opened it before. Every time he went out, he would turn into a blue light and fly out through the window. He never went through the door. This door had a special feature. It could only be opened from the inside and could not be opened from the outside. Of course, this was under normal circumstances. Anyone with a bit of experience in the Jianghu would be able to easily open the door. As the saying goes, it is better to guard against a gentleman than against a villain. Yi Fan returned to the room and closed the door. Then he crouched down and carefully examined the door. Below the door, he could clearly see a knife mark. From the fresh wood grain at the edge of the knife mark, it had appeared after he had gone out last night. It seemed that someone had come here last night with a sharp knife. As for why, he did not know. Perhaps it was for money or perhaps it was to kill. Of these 2 motives, Yi Fan was more inclined to believe the former. He had always been generous. It was possible that there were bandits in this inn who had set their sights on him. As for wanting to kill him, the possibility was not high. He did not have any enemies in this life. Or it could be said that those who had enemies had already died at his hands. For example, the 3 bandits in the restaurant, and those hedonistic sons of rich parents in the bun shop. The only enemies left were Matsumoto Takeyoshi's side and his enemies from his previous life. However, these 2 points were completely impossible. Not to mention that Matsumoto Takeyoshi still needed him. Even if he did not need him, he would not send such trash to die. As for the enemies from his previous life, that was even more impossible. A person who could live for more than 300 years would naturally have a cultivation base. There was no need for him to go through the door. It seemed that this should be a passer-by thief. After coming to this conclusion, Yi Fan smiled and opened the door to go downstairs. He took the mutton soup and beef. 1 man and 1 fox wolfed it down. After eating and drinking to their fill, Yi Fan decided to bring Baihu to the second place where the divine cauldron might be hidden. That was where the divine stone was located, Najwa Peak. No matter what, he would go and take a look first. Anyway, he had nothing to do. After all, it was just a huge rock in front of everyone. If he could see that the huge rock had traces of the divine cauldron barrier during the day, he would break the barrier at night and obtain the secret text. If the huge rock was not a divine cauldron, then he could directly go to Mount Everest at night and save a lot of time. Thinking of this, he closed his eyes and began to change his clothes with his mind. Buzz! Following a burst of red light from his body, the black robe on his body instantly changed. The collar was open, the sleeves were wide, the lapels were wide, and the belt was decorated with auspicious patterns. In the blink of an eye, Yi Fan's black robe turned into a brown Tibetan robe. This was another magical effect of the 8 treasures of the demon realm. Not only was it invulnerable to swords and spears, it could also be changed according to the owner's will. After changing, Yi Fan shook his sleeves, raised his arms and turned around a few times. He nodded with satisfaction. He deliberately made a big cotton hat on the collar of the Tibetan robe. This way, He could cover his silver hair and hide Baihu's figure. It could be said that he killed 2 birds with 1 stone. When Baihu saw that Yi Fan had changed his clothes, it excitedly ran in front of Yi Fan. It curiously looked at Yi Fan from head to toe. Tashi Delek, Xiao Zhao Zhao. Yi Fan pretended to do a Tibetan etiquette to Baihu. He called it auspicious and seemed to be very methodical. Baihu collapsed on the ground, its whole body trembling. Yi Fan's appearance made it unable to stand up from laughing. After an hour, a young man wearing a huge cotton hat and a Tibetan robe appeared on the mountain road of the snowy mountain. He was wearing a brown Tibetan robe with big boots. He held prayer beads in his left hand and a prayer wheel in his right hand. He looked no different from other Tibetans. He was Yi Fan. The leather boots, prayer wheel, and prayer beads were all bought for him by him. If he wanted to pretend, he had to pretend. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Yi Fan imitated the red-clothed old lama and chanted the 6-syllable mantra. He fiddled with the prayer beads and turned the prayer wheel. With a pious face, he followed the mighty crowd to Nacho Peak. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.